Okay, the meeting of the Indian River County Delegation will come to order, and I want to thank everyone for coming. It's kind of a dreary morning, but thank you for coming. And I don't know if you got a chance to see the launch this morning, but we watched it. Wasn't up there, obviously, but watched on TV, and it was absolutely awesome. They did a great job. So hats off to NASA for another great launch. Let me take this opportunity for all our local government officials and nonprofit groups and concerned citizens to voice their concerns and suggestions to their delegation meeting. And that is what this is about. It's not for us to get into a discussion back and forth, but it's more for us to hear what your concerns are and take those back to Tallahassee. I want to thank the City of Vero Beach for graciously always allowing us to have this here, as well as my office in your lobby. And thank you very much. It's always been a great relationship that we've had with you guys. A couple of housekeeping rules, just please, if you'll turn your cell phones off or put it on silent. The restrooms are right outside that door there, easily found. And their speaking cards will be available. Margaret, my district secretary, will be in the back of the room. And if you decide you want to speak and you're not on the agenda, just fill out a card and they'll bring it up, and you'll be more than welcome to speak at the meeting. We're going to do the invocation and the pledge, and it's always nice to have our councilman from Fillsmere make the trip down here, and Joel Tyson's going to lead us in prayer, and then Jack Chestnut, one of our longtime Vero residents, is going to lead us in the pledge immediately afterwards. If we'll please all stand.
Let's pray. Divine and gracious God, we come to you again, thanking you for the privilege of living in a country where we're free to come together and bring our petitions to our legislators. We ask that you would be with us during the course of this meeting, that everything that's done here and said would be proper and in order. Today we come to you praying for our state and praying for our country. We thank you for answering our prayers of giving us new leadership in Washington. And we pray that those people will have the wisdom to turn things around and get us back on track and return us to being one nation under God. Today we also pray for our law enforcement people who seem to be under fire from all corners. We ask that you would be with them and give them the wisdom to make the right decisions when the time comes. Watch over them and protect them and their families. We also pray for our military personnel on the front lines that are over there fighting, allowing us to have meetings such as this. And now as we go into this meeting, we ask that you be with us, guide us, direct us. We ask these things in your precious and holy name. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and I'll ask for Terry Ann to please call the roll.
Representative Mayfield.
Here.
Senator Altman.
Here.
Senator Negron. Madam Chair, quorum has been met.
Thank you. And Senator Negron will be here. He's just running late. So he actually had a previous engagement, so he'll be here. Right, Carrie? Yeah. Now I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce my staff as we get started. We have Terry Palo, who is my new legislative aide. She's from Lakewood Park area, so her parents were glad that she came back home from Washington, D.C. And Terry, I'm really grateful that you're here, and thank you for coming. Margaret Mitchell is my district secretary. Margaret is in the back, and that's who will be collecting the cards up if anyone else wants to speak, Margaret. And then Senator Negron has Carrie Lear here. Carrie has been with Senator Negron for many years, and she does a great job in Tallahassee for him. And then Audrey Tillis, who you guys probably remember being here. She moved back closer to home, going to work in Senator Negron's office. And then with that, I'll let Senator Altman introduce his staff.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Would like to thank everyone for coming out today. And you know, it's our one time a year right before session we have a chance to exchange ideas and to talk and get input. And I want to encourage everyone here we'll have a lot of information, a lot of data come to us today. It's really critical that we follow up with our staff that's going to help cull through that and make sure we do what we need to do, whether it's an appropriation issue or a piece of legislation, or it might even be just something we're trying to not allow pass. So the staff are critically important, and that's why we always like to have them here. And to my left is Rick Kendis, my longtime legislative assistant. Rick's a local guy, grew up here. And a new legislative assistant that I have that's going to be in Tallahassee with me as well is Devin West from Michigan State grad. Really excited about having her here, and she'll be in Tallahassee as well. But get to know these two very well. Obviously, a lot of things. It's a crazy time, 60-day session with a lot to do, and without these folks, we'd never make it happen. And these are probably the two most important people in trying to help get these things accomplished. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Now we've got a tight schedule, and we're just going to move right into it. Most every elected official in here is going to speak. So instead of introducing all of you guys individually, because you're going to speak, you will be introduced at that time because we have a lot to go through on our agenda. So with that said, we're just going to move right on into Mayor Winger with the City of Vero Beach, and Chef Robert Sheff with Wright Attorneys is also going to speak.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Senator Altman and Representative Mayfield, for being here. We really appreciate it in our lovely city of Vero Beach. We're very proud of Vero Beach. And, with the coming of Jim O'Connor and Cindy Lawson and his staff and Wayne Comet and, of course, Tammy Vach that's been with us for years, I believe this city is under the best management that it has been for a long time. We've been here a long time. We've done a number of things. We've faced a number of issues. We're getting our financial house in very good order. We're attacking our unfunded benefits. I think you'll see great progress on that in this year. We want to talk about two issues. One, Wayne Comet will handle, which is the rental issue, short-term rental, which we feel stridently about. We do not want that in our neighborhoods. But in way of introduction to Mr. Wright, a year ago we talked about the step system, and you put bills forward and worked on them in Tallahassee. And I'm happy to report today that we are beginning construction of the step system and to get septic tanks over time back onto our sewer plant. And it wouldn't have happened without a lot of cooperation from a lot of people, so thank you for that. We're also now embarking on a stormwater utility to be sure that drainage off the street has some primary treatment before it goes into the lagoon. We've only got 37% of our city area of 12 square miles where we're able to catch it. But I believe that the city of Vero Beach is in the forefront of helping the lagoon. We've done a lot of things. I won't go into them. But I think if you'll come back in a year, the issue Mr. Wright's going to talk about, the electric, we've made a lot of progress, and we are doing all the things since this last February, all the things that it'll take to really make a marked difference. And we would like to have your help and cooperation. We'd like to have the cooperation of our neighbors, cities in the county and our county, because together we'll get it done faster than if we're divisive. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Wright to give you an update on where we are on the electric utility. But
Great.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. And remember, we got 27 people that are going to speak today, so we need to keep everything to the point and concise, please.
Yes, ma'am. I sure will. Good morning, Representative Mayfield, Senator Altman, citizens. I'm here often at City Council talking about our ongoing issues with the electric utility. So I'll say again, I'm glad to be back here in Vero Beach. I love it here. It's great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today. I will be brief. By way of brief history, as y'all probably know, and most everybody who's familiar with this issue knows, our ongoing efforts to sell our electric utility system to Florida Power and Light Company hit a pretty significant roadblock at the beginning of June when it turned out that the Orlando Utilities Commission would not be able to take assignment of our power purchase agreements with the FMPA. That was a critical condition precedent to closing the deal with FPL, and although we continue to talk with FPL about possible ways to solve that issue, neither of us has come up with a plan to do it. We had to solve a minor procedural problem to make sure we could all talk to each other without potentially invoking legal actions. But by the middle of July, we had a three-way waiver letter in place between OUC, FPL, and the city that agreed that we could all talk to each other about ways that Vero could go forward toward lowering our rates without anybody making a claim that there was a tortious interference with contract or a breach of contract or anything like that. As soon as we got that in place on July 14th, we kicked off and really got moving. We have met several times with Orlando Utilities Commission. They have been very gracious and very helpful and cooperative in working with us toward alternate structures for reworking our power purchase agreement with them. That's a 2008 power purchase agreement through which we buy just about 40% or so of our electricity. It was a really great contract entered into in 2008. Things changed in the energy markets, and the prices today are what they are. But as I said, they're being very gracious. They have offered us two separate sets of proposals, one longer term with bigger price reductions, one shorter term with less price reductions. But nonetheless, we are moving forward with those. There's a lot of moving parts to this analysis that we have to take up with our Utilities Commission in the city and also with Council before we can figure out which way to go. But that's the big thing we're doing to reduce rates. In addition to that, we have a rate study underway, expect results by the end of March, in which we're considering other ways to reduce rates, including financing capital expenditures rather than paying $3 million a year cash for capital expenditures. That would enable us to knock a few bucks off the bill. We have a system optimization and efficiency study. We just received actually just opened the proposals. We expect that contract to be let by mid-January and the results of that to be in by June. We're doing everything we can to lower our rates. Our rates are higher than we wish they were. We all know that, and we're working on it. We're slightly above average in dollars per 1,000 kilowatt hours today. We're slightly above average in the ranking. If you stacked all 54 retail utilities in Florida, we're a little bit above the median. I expect by this time next year, we should be well below average in both counts and well below the median. Additionally, responding to our customers' concerns, the Council has approved resolutions authorizing staff to move forward with a referendum that would be held as closely as possible to the provisions set forth in Section 366.04 sub 7, which was adopted in 2008. And we have also adopted, Council that is, have adopted a resolution authorizing staff to work collaboratively with the county and the town and any other interested citizens and customers toward the establishment of a utility authority with appropriate geographic representation, and we'll be moving forward with those as soon as we can. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, any questions? Good. Okay, thanks, Chef.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to have the city attorney, Wayne, comment. And Wayne's going to speak about what are you going to speak about, Wayne?
Vacation rentals.
Vacation rentals, okay.
A subject you've been hearing about probably for years.
Yeah, we have.
Well, good morning, Representative Mayfield and Senator Altman. Thank you for being here and allowing us to present our ideas and proposals to you. You should have received a short memo or letter from me kind of outlining what we're talking about. I'm going to try and make this pretty short. Transient rentals, vacation rentals, they may be great for the short-term renter, but they're no vacation for our residents in our neighborhoods. I'm not going to go into all the pitfalls and examples of disruptive effects of these rentals within residential communities. There may be other persons present that can give you real-life experiences of what they've experienced and gone through. Last year, 509-032-7B, which is the statute we're talking about, the subsection that preempts local governments from basically not allowing short-term rentals unless you've got a pre-existing grandfathered ordinance in place or regulations in place. It was amended. It loosened it up a little bit so that maybe communities could address the effects, the noise, the traffic, the parking, things like that. But it still doesn't get to the heart of the matter that what communities have done for years and years is to regulate what uses are allowed in their various zoning districts. I mean, that's a fair and reasonable and very legal and historically left to local communities to regulate how the areas within their towns and communities are used. This basically preempts towns from saying where specifically this use is allowed and not allowed. Now, Vero Beach is fortunate that we do have regulations that have been on the books for years. We don't call them vacation rentals. This is kind of a new term that was put in the statute, but we call them guest houses and transient quarters. Fits basically the same definition. And our codes already say where they're allowed. They don't specifically say where they're not allowed, because that's, as you probably know, how zoning regulations work. If it says it's allowed, it's allowed. If it doesn't say it's allowed in the zoning district, it's not allowed. Well, unfortunately, because of this, we believe because of the statute enactment, we've had challenges to the interpretation and the implementation of our longstanding rules. And it got very expensive because the city did take an appeal of one decision. What we'd like to do is to see that preemption actually entirely repealed would be nice, but at the very least, further amend it to take into account local ability where it should be to regulate the uses within their neighborhoods. Such as, I gave you one very quick proposal in my memo to you to say that these things are exempted from the exemption if it's not allowed in the zoning district. And that's what communities need, not just in Vero Beach. We need the ability to be able to amend our ordinances to maybe make them better without the fear of then something challenging and costing the taxpayers more money, saying that, oh no, it still doesn't apply to me. So that's what we're after, is to have you potentially sponsor and bring forward legislation that would do something like that to help us in returning that zoning regulation ability to local communities instead of being preempted for one special use that is not appropriate for except where the local community themselves decide it's permissible. And just one last thing, to explain to you why communities desire, like Vero Beach, desire to continue regulating the uses in their neighborhoods. I'm just going to quote for you some language from a California case. This had to do with the city of Carmel by the Sea, where they had an issue like this. And the appellate court said it stands to reason that residential character of a neighborhood is threatened when homes are occupied not by permanent residents, but by a stream of tenants staying a weekend, a week, or even 29 days. And I'm paraphrasing here. Such rentals undoubtedly affect the essential character of a neighborhood and the stability of a community. Short-term tenants have little interest in public agencies or in the welfare of the citizenry. They do not participate in local government, coach Little League, or join the hospital guild. They do not lead a scout troop, volunteer at the library, or keep an eye on an elderly neighbor. Literally, they are here today, gone tomorrow, without engaging in the sort of activities that weld and strengthen a community. And we've heard over and over from our residents, that's what they want. They want their communities the way they were meant to be, and their quiet neighborhoods the way they were meant to be. And anything you could do to support some legislation to help us do that would be great.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. You have a question, Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Question, I know, and of course this is something that's all throughout the state. What type of working relationship does the county and the city have with the tax collector and the property appraiser in terms of enforcement of the need to pay sales tax and the resort tax for short-term rentals? What?
As far as I know, and Jim, do you know if there's anything? I don't know of any coordination myself.
We do have contact, and since this issue has come up, our code enforcement folks have been in touch with the tax assessor, and finding out, as a matter of fact, the citation that we issued out, we found that they had not been paying the tax. They went back and filed for their license and have started paying taxes. So most of the vacation rentals are now starting, that we find, are now paying the tax, the appropriate tax.
I have a question too, Wayne. And I know Dr. Conway is going to be making a presentation too, and I've really dug into this with him and the county just recently. Now, it's my understanding that what we did do last session, and we didn't repeal the bill,
Right,
but the only thing you cannot regulate is the number of days they can stay. You can do everything else that you want to,
Right.
except the number of days they're allowed to stay. So that means that you can put as many restrictions on them as you want to. You've got the noise restriction, you've got parking restrictions, you've got notification restrictions, so there's a lot of things that I think what I'm hearing is that from the residents is that the county and the cities are not enforcing what they currently have on the books. Now, I don't know if that's true or not in the case that you guys have, but there's some issues here that we're also hearing is that the locals aren't enforcing the laws that they currently have on the book, and we gave all that back to you with the exception of the number of days that you can restrict people in a vacation rental.
But unfortunately, it still says you can't prohibit the vacation rental use.
Right.
And that's what our ordinance, our zoning regulations do. But
if you currently have that in zoning, you were grandfathered in.
Right.
Okay, so
Right. The
you
problem
can
is-
restrict it here.
the problem is because of being emboldened by this statute, you've got property owners that are flaunting our regulations, and then they challenge them, and it's very costly for the city.
I know the area up in Cocoa Beach has a similar, Cape Canaveral, but obviously with the cruise ships and the tourism, they
Right.
have a similar problem. And I know some counties, and maybe not all, and I'm glad it's not here, in some counties the tax collectors are arguing they don't have the statutory authority to very strongly enforce the resort tax, which I think would help prevent. I mean, these are residential areas. They should be zoned for a hotel or a bed and breakfast or something.
Well, that's what we have.
Yeah,
But
and-
you've got owners of these residences that have bought them. There's people going out there right now buying residences just to rent them out for these short-term rentals, and it's just snowballing in our neighborhoods. And we just don't have the enforcement staff nor the money to continually go after these and then fight the challenges to our regulations. If it was made clear that the local governments still have the ability to enforce their zoning regulations, not the way they're operated, we don't care about the length of time or the frequency. That all has to do with the definition of what is a vacation rental. If it's a vacation rental and fits that definition, we have regulations that do say it's not permitted. But it's in the enforcement side to make it clear to these owners that, yes, cities and counties can enforce these regulations.
Okay, and the language that you have in here is
That's just one suggestion.
Okay.
The last sentence would probably do it, that change.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we're going to move on to our sheriff, Laurel. There he is.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senator Altman. It's indeed a pleasure to reflect a little bit on where we've been and where the Florida Sheriff's Association is going and some issues that we have. Number one, in the state of Florida, as you all know, we're experiencing a 40-year crime rate low, which is truly remarkable for a state with a lot of things that are happening not only in our communities but in our state and in our nation. One of our biggest efforts this year is to continue to maintain the 85% rule in opposition of any type of early release or reduction of minimum mandatory. So we would ask for your support on that. We feel comfortable that the 85% is the reason why our crime rate is lower than before, than any other time. Another interesting thing that kind of ties in with the previous speakers deals with our homeowners' rights and looking at our Landlord-Tenant Act. In other words, sometimes in Indian River County and throughout the state, we have issues where uninvited or invited guests will come into a homeowner, let's say, and rent a room for a while. Law enforcement has a difficult time removing those folks from the homes if, in fact, that person, let's say, is paying the water bill or the light bill or some other reason. So we would ask for perhaps some tweaking on that, and you'll see some legislation on the way. And finally, I'll be brief that we're proud that Indian River County is one of the first to establish a mental health court. This is a statewide issue. Mental health in America, as you know, is gigantic. We have a pilot program that we'll be launching in January with the help of our county commissioners and our county administrator that helped us out about 3 weeks ago. But we're looking at this in a little broader scope that each and every county have some type of mental health court standards. To cut to the chase, it's basically about some statewide funding that could help us. We know that it works in other counties very well. We have a template that's very similar to some of the other counties. That's going to be a big issue this year in an otherwise quiet legislative session that we forecast for the Florida Sheriff's Association. So any help that you can direct statewide back to the locals with mental health assistance, we'd greatly appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go to our Dr. Massey. There he is. Hey, Dr. Massey.
Madam Chairman, I definitely heard your request. You have 2 items in front of you in a packet. I'm only going to talk about 1 item and waive the rest of my time. First of all, if you would look at this sheet, it's a distribution sheet from last year's budget. It's in the left side of your blue packet. Packet looks like this. And the left side pocket of that packet, if you'd pull that out, I'll very briefly show you the most important thing to us. If you go down to the highlighted school, you'll be looking at Indian River State College. If you go from left to right, you will see that last year, for a $100 million plus organization, we only received $160,000 recurring operating funds. I'll give you a chance to go across all of the FRS issues. You know, they really don't even come to us. They're taken out of our budget. They circle right back to Tallahassee. Compression is an issue that we will no longer support. It's taking money and giving to special schools who over the past have not kept their funding up to speed, so therefore they're getting additional funding. And then schools that have worked hard over the years and kept their funding up are getting zero. I will not support that through the President's Council or at the state any longer. And you go to the allocation for the funding formula. That is a formula, you know, that money goes in the front end, fairly distributed to all of our colleges. And then you go to the final item, which is dual enrollment. That is non-recurring money handled specifically for dual enrollment tuition. So $160,000 is what we got. We can't continue to do that with the enrollment increase we're getting and the other obligations that we have. We had no tuition increase for the 2 last years and only a 3% prior year to that. Our enrollments are increasing. We have a tremendous responsibility to accept 65% of high school graduates coming out of our area is typically the percentage that select to go directly to the college prior to going to a university. And unfortunately, some of those need remediation. So remediation was totally restructured a couple of years ago. And we are working very, very hard on that to do the co-requisites, taking students and put them directly into college credit. But if they're not ready, running co-requisite programs, either modular, compressed, or otherwise, to be sure that we can keep those in those classes, because really everything is about completion. We're in the job of educating and graduating, not everybody hanging around and socializing in the institution. We have to get them out. We have set a goal of 60% completion rate between now and 2020, an increase of what we currently do. So every year you've seen those graduation rates go up, and working very hard to get people industry certified ready to accept jobs that are popping up now, and it's a good thing. The jobs are coming back. We want to train people to move in those jobs. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Be happy to answer any questions, and I will be back to see each of you to go in more detail about the other elements in the packet.
You have any questions?
Probably will have a lot of questions. I know these formulas are really complex, and I enjoy the opportunity to sit down and.
I think we have an appointment. We're coming to visit you.
Excellent.
Okay.
Dr. Massey, I have one question. Because the remedial, that is a real issue from what I'm hearing. The number of students coming in and they're having to have remedial classes, and that has changed, which I know puts a harder burden on the college. I'm assuming that you guys are working with St. Lucie County School District and Indian River County School District to find out where, why that's happening. Because if we're, graduating our students out, they're supposed to be college and career ready, but yet the ones that are going to college is having to take remedial classes. A large percentage of them are having to take it. Is there a program that has been working with the school district that possibly the test that's been done ahead of time to see if they are ready, that gives them a couple of more years to get the special attention they need in high school before they get out of high school going on to college?
I'm Chairman, we're working with all of our school districts. We start as early as middle school. We have some programs we actually built in the middle school that are part of some of our grant programs to introduce kids to the kind of thinking that we'll need to have to go to college. We are working with the schools. We have put courses in the schools. We have all of our programs that we develop, modular programs, online programs. We have given all of our programs to the schools. When they're tested at the 10th grade and 11th grade and found not to be college ready, then we're going to, through partnerships, create readiness academies that will take place to 12th grade of their education, so that we're sure that the content in the math, the English, and the reading is a relevant content that moves them to a pathway in our institution that they would be ready to go in and accept those general education as well as other courses. So we are working very hard, and the school districts are great partners of ours, and we're working to try to make that happen.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move on to one of our favorite managers up in Fellsmere. Jason, I understand you have another engagement you have to get to, so we're going to go ahead and move you up.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate the consideration. I've got a TAC committee to chair at 10. And I really appreciate y'all's accessibility. I'll be brief. We have somewhat of an obscure request, and that's an amendment to Chapter 479 to be able to do vegetative management for signage. Because the nature in which municipalities or counties can put up signs adjacent to state highway systems. Right now, we're not eligible for a vegetation management permit. So when we put up a sign, in this case, in partnership with FIT, to call out the challenge course, it's obviously a wonderful amenity for this area. Over the course of time, that's going to become obstructed because of the vegetation along I-95. So what we'd like to do, we have some verbiage there we've offered to offer your consideration. If we could get that in place in the next year or so, we can keep the sign from being obstructed. We've got a big investment in that property. We want the public to know what it's all about, and this would really help in that regard.
Okay, great.
Okay,
thanks. We'll look at that.
Thank you.
We will.
Take care.
We need to look at that. Okay, now we're going to move to Commissioner Solari, Indian River County Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to thank you for the work that you do for the citizens of Indian River County. And today I'd like to discuss two issues. The first is continued support for Indian River County's lagoon projects. You've been very helpful in the past, but like all counties along the Indian River Lagoon, Indian River County is committed to doing a lot more to restore the lagoon to a healthier condition. In the coming year, we'd like as much help as possible to get funding assistance with three different projects. One, funding to help provide for the conversion of an area of Sebastian adjacent to the Indian River Lagoon from septic to county sewer. The second is funding for an additional oyster reef project, which would be located in the lagoon, and our first one appears to be very successful in helping to clean up some of the pollution in the lagoon. And the third is for a larger alternative water supply project, which will be designed to help clean polluted water before it enters the lagoon and actually, in a large part, prevent the water from ever going to the lagoon. The second issue is one that wasn't even on the radar a year ago, but which may be as important to the residents of the Treasure Coast as the lagoon, and that's Fortress Investment Group's All Aboard Florida Passenger Rail Project. As more residents are becoming aware each week, no issue facing the Treasure Coast promises to be as devastating to our communities. Thanks to the many efforts of this delegation, along with the great work done by Treasure Coast residents, All Aboard Florida is not a done deal. And I believe that to a lot of people in Fortress Investment Group, the project is further behind than it was a year ago. I believe that working together we can stop this project. In the next session, I would ask that you not support any state funding for anything related to All Aboard Florida Passenger Rail Project down the eastern portion of the Treasure Coast. I'd ask you to support legislation that appropriately regulates high-speed rail in the state of Florida and that ensures that the maximum sealed corridor safety requirements are installed at every railroad crossing and along the entire corridor in order to maximize the safety of our residents. I'd like this delegation to support legislation that requires All Aboard Florida, not the citizens that it is negatively impacting, to pay for all safety requirements necessary to ensure the highest degree of safety for our residents, including those necessary for quiet zones applied for by local governments. And finally, a state study on high-speed rail showed that the FECI tracks was the worst of 4 spots to locate a high-speed rail project. The CSX tracks along I-95 or along the Turnpike were all judged by the state study to be much superior locations for this type of project. Please join the overwhelming majority of citizens in the Treasure Coast and support the move of the All Aboard Florida project to a western track, which is clearly where it belongs and which most probably is where it will have the greatest chance of having some success without destroying many communities along the Treasure Coast. Thank you very much, and allow me to take this opportunity to wish you and all of yours a very Merry Christmas and a very happy holiday season.
Thanks. Any questions? I have one question on the funding. Is the City of Sebastian working with you guys on this request for money from the septic to the sewer project?
Well, they definitely want the project done,
okay.
Yes.
And the second question, is this the total cost of the projects, or is this a portion of the projects?
I believe it'll be a large portion of the project.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to have Commissioner Tim Zork is going to speak.
Good morning, everyone. Representative Mayfield, Senator Altman. Nice to see everybody this morning on this rain-soaked Friday. I'm going to be speaking on 2 topics, the Port Canaveral Authority Forward Trade Zone and legislative oversight of FMPA. The Forward Trade Zone item is a carryover from last year. In essence, what we're looking for is the Port Canaveral charter needs to have the county's name, Indian River, added to their charter. That's essentially the only change. That would then allow a subzone of the foreign trade zone that's registered at Port Canaveral to be extended down into Indian River County. The benefits of a foreign trade zone designation would help not just manufacturing industry, but anybody that receives container goods that are coming in from foreign countries that also export manufactured goods or goods out to foreign countries. Some of the benefits are quicker and shorter turnaround times on the paperwork processing of the contents that have to be registered as they come in. Reduced in fees of what you pay for each container that comes in or leaves if you're part of a forward trade zone. It really just streamlines the process. And the subzone is something that's relatively new on the federal side that started 4 or 5 years ago, and the process has now been more streamlined. But the county has a consultant on retainer ready to go. The only missing item is having the name Indian River County added to the port's charter. I have a meeting scheduled to appear at the next Port Commission meeting to also give the request to them, because the Port Commission has to take up the action on their own. We can't make them do it. They have to decide they want to to add Indian River County to the charter. And this whole process started with an invitation from the port to us at a meeting I attended up there, and then the charter glitch came up. So we'll continue pursuing that. I don't know if that would be considered a local bill if that has to have the additional county name added to their charter.
I don't believe so. I think it is. It's up to the port authority to be able to do that. I don't think there's any local bill because I did check into this last year when it came up.
Right. Both of you did,
Yeah.
and followed up on it. Okay. Next item. Yes, ma'am.
I think you're right, although the only time it could, let's hypothetically say the port refused, the Brevard legislative delegation could add it to the charter.
Okay.
I mean, it could be placed in the charter by amendment to the local bill, whether the port wanted it or not.
Right.
If we felt from a public policy point of view it should be there, we could probably add it there.
To the Brevard.
Are you getting any sense from the Port Commission? What kind of response are you getting from
We haven't had much communication with them in the recent months. I know last year they were trying to do the big port overhaul, then the investment, the new management company and the large investment. They were, I think, focusing on those local issues that they needed to get worked out and in place because they had some deadlines with the new company that's managing the port and a large investment that's being made. I'm hoping now that they've kind of got that completed, caught their breath, and can deal with this, because any benefit of more containers coming in and out would benefit the port, and that was their original reason for approaching or suggesting that it would be a beneficial for us to bring the program down to here, is increased port traffic for them. But you're not required to have your containers come through Port Canaveral, but obviously they feel that if we have it, the likelihood that they would get more container business would be increased.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is legislative oversight of the Florida Municipal Power Agency. For those of you who don't know, I think everybody in here by now knows who that group is. FMPA is part of the 31 municipal electric utility systems that are owners of FMPA and serve approximately 2 million Floridians. Currently, they are not regulated by the Public Service Commission. Regulation by the Public Service Commission won't guarantee lower rates. But if you look over the history of things, most people have heard of the word Taylor swaps and other hedge positions, that the FMPA group has lost hundreds of millions of dollars, which is recouped by ratepayers through higher rates. So oversight could potentially help keep some of those bad investments from happening. I know recently Florida Power and Light looked at, they wanted to invest in natural gas. They had to go to the Public Service Commission to ask, can we do that? If they have to ask permission for some of the things that they had done in the past, they may not have been allowed to do those, which then those losses would not have to have been recouped through the increase in higher rates. I've personally attended the FMPA board meetings for over the last year, and I think oversight will only benefit the ratepayers in the state, not just here, but all the ratepayers, because if you quantify the members of FMPA, there was, Mr. Sheffrite explained earlier that they're very competitive, but they're only competitive when you measure FMPA members against FMPA members. If you put in private sector power producers, they're vastly not competitive in the ranges of some places it's 5%, some places it might be closer to 40% difference on the rates. Locally here it makes about a $20+ million rate difference locally, but statewide it's almost $1 billion of higher rates than if these FMPA, these ratepayers had a choice of going to a private provider. Their electric rates statewide would be about $1 billion less. That's quite a chunk of money that businesses and residents are having to pay higher rates, and I'd say some of it is due to lack of oversight of their prior activities and whatever may be coming up on the future and the horizon. So we don't have anything specific yet of what to do, but oversight by the PSC I think would be a very positive step to have that agency regulated by them.
As you know, I filed bills on this last year.
Yes.
And got no support from the County Association of Counties.
Right.
Are you guys going to bring this before the Association of Counties and ask for their support? Because this when we try to do this, people view this as just a Vero Beach issue.
Right.
And I've also brought it to the attention, and we are getting some traction on the fact, recognizing that FMPA is the issue here. But it would certainly be helpful for this delegation to have support from the Association of Counties when we're going in to try to make changes like this as a statewide effect. And I agree with you, and that's what we've been fighting this for. That's why we're having an audit of the FMPA. It's going to be coming out sometime by the end of this month so that we can address these issues over next session. But are you going to bring this up, or whoever sits on your delegation?
I would say that the mood of the Florida Association of Counties probably hasn't changed. The FMPA sort of support group and some of their lobbying people, I'm sure, are trying to keep their ship tight together and not allow any changes to happen. I think part of it, when a ratepayer doesn't realize...
Did you say keep their ship tight together?
Well, I mean, they're keeping their group together. Pun from the port.
Okay, I just want to be sure.
They, if you're let's say if you're, I'm trying to think one that I can give you some fairly accurate numbers on, Jacksonville. If ratepayers in Jacksonville knew that if they had private provider rates and it would save the ratepayers $350 million, they would probably tell their group to be more supportive of something. But since they don't know how much they're overpaying, they don't realize, gee, if I had power from XYZ compared to here, I could be saving 20% on my bill. They don't know what they're overpaying. Because obviously when they send the bill, they're not saying, by the way, if you went to my competitor, you'd save 20% on your bill, you should go get your power from them. They don't want people to know that they're being overcharged. Okay. But we will still continue to bring it up to them, but I don't expect to have friendly reception on their side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to hear from the County Attorney, Dylan. There he is.
Good morning. I just want to thank you all for being here this morning. My name is Dylan Reingold. I'm the County Attorney for Indian River County, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to address your delegation this morning. I will try to keep this brief as I see we have a very full house. You've heard the story already. You heard from Mr. Chef Wright, and you've heard from Commissioner Zork on the electric utility issue. I would simply state what you heard this morning was that the sale is blocked, and I can tell you that Indian River County believes that the sale of the electric utility to FPL is in the greatest interests of the citizens of this community and the ratepayers, and therefore we would appreciate any support that this delegation can provide in making that sale happen. If that sale cannot be completed, and first off, I would like to thank each and every one of you who I know have worked so hard over the last couple of years on various legislation that's been proposed and other measures that you've tried, and we certainly will do our best to reach out to our counterparts at FAC and the other places that we can do to try to help get stuff done. And so I just want to thank you very much for your past efforts. In the event the sale cannot be completed, however, we would greatly appreciate your support in helping those folks who live outside of the city. Over 60% of the customer base lives outside the city, and those folks who are served by the electric utility do not have a voice in the governing body. Indian River County has at this stage opted not to renew the franchise agreement with the City of Vero Beach. We have filed a PSC petition requesting a declaratory statement concerning our rights and responsibilities with seeking a successor franchisee. At this time, I simply would welcome any assistance that you could provide in either of these two efforts, one the full sale or at least a partial either sale or to help our folks get out. At this stage, we don't know whether that's a local bill solution. We don't know if that's a general bill solution, but we would appreciate your support this morning, at least voting on, at least giving us the option of a local bill that would either support the full sale or the removal of the folks who live on the outside portions. And with that, I would like to close. Thank you very much and available for questions.
Do you have any questions, Senator? No. Thank you. Listen, you guys, this has been a fight. It's been a fight for the last 8 years. I'm hoping that this year that will be the year that we can get something moving forward, because it is not right. 60% of the residents are covering the use of in the expense of the city utility, and that doesn't mean that our partners with the city utilities, we don't love them. We do. They're great people, but when it's all said and done, 60% of the residents is covering the expense and has no say over how the utility is being ran. And in my view, FMPA is a IOU to municipalities, and therefore they should be under the Public Service Commission, especially the ones that have entitlements with FMPA, because that's the decisions that are being made are the ones that have the entitlement. And so, I'm fully support, and I'll continue to fight to my last breath to try to get some control over what the FMPA is doing to our municipalities and to the residents that are having to deal with the municipalities that deal with FMPA. So hopefully this year, I'm hoping from the audit that they'll enlighten the rest of our members that this is an issue and they do need to take it serious and address it. But thank you guys for continuing the fight with
us. Thank you very much. And I know pursuant to the rules, it talks about it, there needs to be some sort of vote at the local level in case there is a local bill. So we would appreciate your support this morning on that.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan.
So we may have to have another meeting on that.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted to either consider just a broad statement this morning of support or a delegation meeting subsequent after this. I defer to the wishes of the delegation.
Okay. Can we do just a general?
Yeah, I think maybe what we ought to do
when Joe gets here, maybe,
is wait till the end of the meeting and obviously give everyone an opportunity on all sides of the issue to have a word. We want to be sure we procedurally follow everything.
I welcome that opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to hear from Kate Cotner. Kate. Kate is also the Assistant County Attorney with the Indian River County Commission.
I am. Thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to each of you and your staff. You are always so open to hearing the concerns of not only the county, but also your constituents, and it doesn't go unnoticed. You guys are very appreciated, so thank you. I am here this morning to talk about 3 issues, so I will try to be as brief as possible. I'm going to start with Chapter 180, specifically Section 180.2. This Chapter 180 was created in 1932, and the way that the statute currently reads is that municipalities are authorized to expand their utility services into the unincorporated areas of a county. They're authorized to do that. So, but they don't have to receive permission or even consult with the county government to do so. And while this makes perfect sense, and when you look at it from the 1932s, when the majority of the population was residing within the city limits, it's really outdated at this point. So we're asking to level the playing field a little bit, and we're requesting your support on an amendment to Section 180.2 to basically say that if a municipality would like to expand its utility services into an unincorporated area, they first have to ask for and receive permission from the county government, which represents those citizens in the unincorporated area. The second issue I'm going to talk to you about today has to do with Section 153.3. Now, this pertains to water and sewer franchise agreements. Again, historically, the cities had the majority of the population, so they had the resources. And they entered into these long-term franchise agreements, the city and the county, to provide water and sewer services to the folks in the unincorporated area. Unfortunately, the statute is silent or doesn't give any sort of guidance as to what happens when the franchise agreement expires. So we're requesting an amendment to Section 153.03 to basically say that if a franchise agreement between a city and a municipality and a county is expired, that these citizens that reside within the unincorporated area would be given the opportunity to either stay with the city utility, whether it's water or sewer, or they could choose a different option, just to be able to give them a choice. And this can be done, through a mechanism such as a poll, a survey, or even a referendum. The third item. At this point in time, I think everyone understands that the cost-sharing program for the state's secure juvenile detention care centers, it's fundamentally flawed. And we were very close last year to coming to some sort of a resolution within the Florida legislature. Both the House and the Senate proposed bills, and unfortunately they both failed to pass. So this year, I'm before you once again with a much more condensed version of what I presented last year, basically to request that you guys support legislation making the state of Florida solely responsible for funding the state's juvenile detention care centers. If that's not a viable option, then to support basically a funding scheme that was ruled by the First District Court of Appeal in 2014. They came out with an opinion which says that the non-fiscally restrained counties should be responsible for approximately 37% of the costs associated with secure juvenile detention care. So I'm open to any questions. No?
I'll go back to the, have you talked to the county association on this? Because again, this was a bill last year that I filed. I had no support when I presented it to the Energy Committee in supporting this, because again, this is a statewide change, and unless you get the county associations to support this and the League of Cities to support this, we are fighting an uphill battle, which I'll fight, but it's one of these things where we have to have support in Tallahassee, because there's 67 counties out there that may not agree with what we're wanting to do here that this is going to affect, and we have to have their support to try to get it moved through the House.
Absolutely, and I will let you know that we have reached out to the Florida Association of Counties. While last year's bill was fantastic, the Indian River County loved everything about it. I think that they didn't support it because the majority of their counties didn't support it. So this year we have received confirmation if we give them a very simple version, just making the changes, they will support it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can
you get us that language of that?
Yes,
of what they will support?
Yes.
So we'll have it. Okay, great.
And it's not always easy to get that support. I know we have a very diverse state, and each county has different interests and needs. Not to mention that we have charter counties, non-charter counties, metro forms of government like in Dade and Duval County. And I know it is difficult to get that. But I think one thing that we can work together on is there are certain key counties that have certain key members that if we can get them on board, that's going to help us, because if we have a key committee chair or presiding officer that has a problem in their own home district. So I think strategically we could work together. And
absolutely. Thank you.
This is common sense. I
know you're working on that.
And that's what it's common sense. If they're going to go into your area, they should get permission. And if you're going into their area, you have to get permission. So it was equal playing field. And so it's a common sense that needs to be done, but common sense doesn't always play out.
Actually, when it makes common sense, it probably is a little more difficult in Tallahassee.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Kate. And again, you guys have done a great job keeping our office informed of what you're doing and what's going on, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on now to Jason Brown. Jason, are you speaking too? Okay. And Jason works for the Indian River County Commissioners too as a finance. Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a question for the city and the county, but we'll wait for that as it moves to the end.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, good morning.
I mean, the end of the city-county presentations.
Right, got it.
Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you for listening to us today, and I want to thank you for all of the good work that you folks have done for the county and our citizens in the past and ongoing. I want to talk to you today about a fairly simple thing. It's court funding. About 10 years ago, the Article 5 revision addressed how the funding for the state court system and the circuit court system is funded. And as you know, most of the expenses are funded by the state for the judges, the state attorney's office, public defenders. There are certain expenditures that are the responsibility of counties. Those include things like facilities, IT, teen court, some other things like that. And the legislature has provided revenues to the counties to fund those expenditures. What we're looking for today is a minor change to Section 29.008 of Florida statutes, where the counties are required to spend 1.5% more each year on those expenditures. We just don't think that's in line with good conservative, fiscal conservative budgeting. what we had during the Great Recession was a tremendous drop-off in these revenues and the other revenues that the county uses to fund services for our residents. The difference is in all those other areas, we cut back. Our property taxes dropped our tax roll dropped by 31%. We delivered $30 million in property tax reductions to our constituents during that time period because we were able to. We cut back county departments. We cut our staffing 27%, looked at all kinds of ways. And that was really an opportunity. It was difficult to go through, but it was a good thing that enabled us to kind of right-size county government, make it more efficient, be better at the end of the day. We're better today than we were back in 2006. We're more efficient, more lean government, which I think is always a good thing. We were unable to do that in this court area because we had to continue to spend 1.5% more per year, year after year, even though those revenues were dropping off. And that's no reflection of the judges or the state attorney or the public defender. They've been very responsible with their dollars. We were just precluded from reducing expenditures during any time, and we think that's a not a good policy, spending policy, to just be on autopilot to spend more money year after year after year. So there is requirement in the statute that we adequately fund these services, and that's something that we have worked hand in hand with the court system and state attorney, public defender's office to do that. So that's the simple change that we would like to see. The Florida Association of Counties has added this to their legislative priorities list, and with that being said, I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions? Dan? Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to round out our county section with the Joe Baird, County Administrator. Joe's going to bring it all back home.
Good morning. I'm Joe Baird, the County Administrator, and I'd first like to thank you for all the hard work you've done for the county over the years and all the funding you've got for us and the support. This morning I want to talk about beach renourishment. Currently we have, we're just asking that you continue to fund beach renourishment statewide, and if not, increase it. You have a beach management funding assistance program, and it's been very helpful to us, and it's enabled us to restore a lot of our beaches. Actually, currently as we talk, we've got a project that's underway that the state has partnered with and paid 50% of the $3.1 million for Sector 3. Of course, the beaches are very important to us for tourism and quality of life, and we just want you to continue to fund that program, and if not, increase it. We'd like to move to finish Sector 3 and also start to do Sector 5 in Vero Beach. I think it's very important to the city of Vero Beach and to the county to get that project. And we won't be able to do it for many years unless we get state assistance and cost sharing. And we would just like you to continue to fund that program, if not increase it.
Great, Joe. Any questions, Senator? You good?
No, I just want to thank Indian River County for their tenacious and continual support of this program. I think they've been a leader in the state in advocating for this, and obviously our beaches here in Indian River County have probably been some of the most stressed beaches, not through the action of their own, by other things that have been put into the system that have caused problems, and we want to continue fighting for that.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Now we're going to go to the beautiful little city of Sebastian. Mayor Gilmore is there. He is.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair, Senator Altman. Thank you for all that you do for the beautiful, largest city in Indian River County, Sebastian. We have 4 issues that the City Council has asked me to bring to you all. Number 1 would be the condition of the Indian River Lagoon. The condition of the Indian River Lagoon, the estuary, has significant environmental, economic, and recreational impacts that affect the entire area. The City of Sebastian requests that significant financial resources be allocated in efforts to reduce nutrient loading of the lagoon. Second, all aboard Florida. The Sebastian City Council has passed a resolution demanding that no public money be used for funding of the AAF Rail Initiative. The city requests that the state of Florida does not participate in funding any aspect of the All Aboard Florida project. 3, septic to sewer connections. It's well established that the proliferation of septic systems along the Treasure Coast has added to the instability of the Indian River Lagoon. The city requests that additional state funding is sought to aid in septic to sewer connection possibilities. Thank you, Representative Mayfield, for your introduction of that bill last year that didn't quite make it. But we did pass a resolution in support of that, and we would welcome you to come to our council. And if you're going to bring that back again, we would pass another resolution if that'll help. Support it. And number 4, oyster bed projects. The addition of oyster beds along the coastlines of the lagoon has been proven to increase the cleanliness of the estuary. State funding of these projects in concert with other efforts will hasten the results in cleaning our lagoon. And we are, as we speak, we are anticipating starting several projects with the oyster mats. I believe, Vero Beach and the county has already done some of that, so we're kind of piggybacking on their work. As current Vice President, President-elect of the Treasure Coast Regional League of Cities, of course, we have the League of Cities initiative, which you probably are well aware of. I won't burden you with that right now, but I will make sure that you all get a copy of their issues as well. Thank you for all you do. Any questions?
Great. Thank you. Any questions? No. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Now that ends up all of our government requests, and Senator Altman had some comments.
A couple comments. On the All Aboard Florida issue, I know we've received a response from the Attorney General. I don't know if the Attorney General has given a formal response to the City of Sebastian and Indian River County. I want to thank both for chiming in on that effort, and that was to ask the Attorney General to look at the legality of the accident tax that we're faced on having to suffer the negative impacts of that train, and giving the Orlando Expressway Authority virtual veto power of our ability to be a part of that discussion in terms of access to the train, the impact to our community. And I'd like to maybe ask the county or the city, I think the city just left, but ask the county and the city to evaluate the legal merit of that opinion. And I think the opinion basically was that we don't give opinions on these type of things. And I don't know if there's a legal precedent to that or if there are other legal opinions that the Attorney General has given that are similar, but I would love to have their input on that. And I don't know if have you had a chance to look at the county had a chance to look at the letter? Do you know if she's given a formal response to the county's request?
Kate, you want to address that for the county?
Sure.
Do you know?
We have not received anything from Attorney General Pam Bondi. I have not seen your letter, but I will certainly take a look at it, and we can do an assessment of it. That's what you're asking.
So she hasn't responded to you officially, because you guys as well. Okay, that's interesting.
The county hasn't sent off a request to Pam Bondi, or excuse me, Attorney General Pam Bondi. I think you were the one, you had the request.
Yeah, I know there was a resolution, though, and I assume that was forwarded to her.
Vero Beach did a resolution supporting your request.
And we did the resolution supporting.
But y'all haven't heard anything back from them as well?
Not at all.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll get you a copy of that and make sure that we...
Thank you. I'll be happy to.
Okay, thank you. The other issue, I know last year in the delegation, and I think it was the city of Vero, I don't remember, but we had a presentation on, it was either the county or the city, on audit impacts that the local governments were faced. I think it was coming out of the state comptroller in terms of audit requirements. Does anyone have any recollection of that? Okay, I can follow up, but I was just more curious. There was some concern about negative impacts on the local governments in terms of potential audits. And I guess it's okay then. Maybe the problem was resolved administratively. Thank you. That was the only two questions I had.
Thank you, Senator Altman. Okay, now we'll move into the community presentation, and we're going to start off with our Indian River Chamber of Commerce. Helene, you're going to do the presentation?
Yes,
Great.
thank you. Good morning, Representative Mayfield and Senator Altman. Helene Castletine with the Indian River Chamber of Commerce. I serve as the Economic Development Director. I also serve as the Enterprise Zone Coordinator for our local Enterprise Zone program. I'm here this morning to ask for your support in reauthorizing Florida's Enterprise Zone program through 2025. As I'm sure you're aware, it is scheduled to sunset on December 31st, 2015. Per Florida statute, it is subject to review every 10 years. The program began back in 1982. There have been some major revisions made to the program over the years, but we think it's important, especially in today's economy, that this program continue. This is one of the tools that we use in economic development to attract new business to our local communities, as well as to encourage local businesses to expand. Site selectors, when they send out their request for proposals, oftentimes will ask if the site that we're proposing for their project, for their client, is located within an enterprise zone. I also get calls from around the country from tax consultants calling on behalf of their clients, asking if the address, their client's address, is within our enterprise zone. One thing I think that needs to be pointed out is that the Enterprise Zone program is not your typical incentive. It's not one of those but-for incentives, as some of the other programs available through Florida, that a company but for an incentive will not locate to Vero Beach if it were not for that incentive. While it is something that we use to encourage private investment, the Enterprise Zone program is more of a by right type of program. That is, if a company is located within the enterprise zone and meets those eligibility criteria, those minimum thresholds, they are eligible to apply for those enterprise zone benefits, either tax credits or sales tax refunds. There are currently 36 states in the U.S. that have some sort of an enterprise zone program. All of our competitors in the Southeast have an enterprise zone program. As I mentioned, we do have one here locally. It was designated in October of 2005, and we did this immediately following the hurricanes of 2004 in a way to help our largest employer, Piper Aircraft, get back up to full operations immediately after the hurricanes, and it worked. Piper, by far, has been the largest user of our Enterprise Zone program, investing millions of dollars over the last 9 years in new equipment and machinery in their facility. I will also mention Riverfront Packing and IMG Citrus, two of our local packing houses, have also utilized the program, investing tens of thousands of dollars over the last 9 years in their facilities. I know one of the things that OPAGA had brought out in the report that came out earlier this year in January is that the program didn't work because there were no increases in property values. I beg to differ, especially as it relates to our local enterprise zone. We've had several companies come into the enterprise zone. Example, Oculina Bank relocated their administrative offices to the enterprise zone, did some major renovations to their building, and their property values have increased substantially. And in your backup material, I actually supplied some of that information on some of the other enterprise zone businesses. I will also mention that the Indian River County Board of County Commission and the City of Vero Beach City Council both approved resolutions of support to continue this program through 2025. And Enterprise Florida, our statewide economic development organization, and the Florida Economic Development Council, our statewide industry association, has partnered to form a task force. I'm on that task force to come up with recommendations to make this program better, if you will, perhaps even tighten it up a little bit. I've been involved with this program for a number of years, not just here in Indian River, but in Collier County as well. And I know that there are entities around the state that have benefited the program in ways that perhaps it wasn't fully intended. So there does need to be some tightening up a bit, and we are working on coming up with some recommendations to that effect. Enterprise Florida and FEDC also partnered with Florida Tax Watch to develop a statewide return on investment report. I believe that report is going to be completed in January, about the same time that OPAGA comes out with their report. So with that, if you all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah,
just a quick question.
Senator?
I have not read that OPAGA report, but just the measure of whether property values increased or not, that's not necessarily a good measure, because with the economic problems we've had, the prevention of the rate of drop of property values should also be considered. And, I mean, that should not be the only measure. It sounds like that was the only criteria, whether property values went up or not.
That was one of the things that was brought out in the report, and I believe when they testified to one of the committees, that was also mentioned. And I agree with you, Senator. Given the past 4 or 5 years, certainly property taxes will not have increased because of the economy. So I agree with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Helena.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next we're going to hear from Bill Ingwa with the Sebastian Charter High School. Hey. Oh, both wrong? Okay. Oh, okay.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I don't often speak in front of people because I'm a teacher. It's Bill Ingwe, by the way, and
okay.
That's okay. In Sebastian Charter Junior High School. I'm a retired educator from New York, and I'm teaching full-time at Sebastian Charter, a favorite course of yours, civics. And what I've prepared for you is really a look at the issue of funding of charter schools. I don't imagine I'm anything like John Steinbeck and winning a Pulitzer in 1940, but he became a person that was directly involved in reality novels. So this is a kind of a reality novel where I created something around you. This is a story of a representative's 3 children, Evan, Samuel, and Coleman, and I'll just excerpt a little bit out of it. Each of her children, the 3 children, have 2 children, and what happens is one decides to send it to Vero Beach Elementary, another to Sebastian Charter Junior High, and the 3rd child of the representative sends one to the charter and one to the public. And they're really excited because Indian River has great schools, it's world-class education, and we realize, according to state statute 2014, that all charter schools in Florida are public schools. So with it in mind, they figure there's a lot of money going out after all the 3 children of the representative live on the same block. They all pay the same $2,000 in school tax. Once they receive the money in Tallahassee, it's sent back to the school district in Indian River County, and at that very moment, the children discover the math is not correct. What typically would be 17,000 children divided into the $20 million available actually should be about $1,187. The charter school receives about $80,000, and the rest goes to the other schools, the non-charter schools. So in essence, they're short something like $240,000 in millage dollars, and they only receive $80,000 when they should receive around $320,000. So at the very end, I indicate, so each of the state representatives' children gave the state $2,000, but their children received different funds. Full millage share at Vero Beach Elementary, part millage at Sebastian Charter, and the sum of the 2 children, one at each of the schools, received different funding, all because May is being used by the school districts throughout the state. Thus came the question when the children came home and the state representatives' children had a question. Of the 3 sons, one said, "Dad, can Grandma lend me her computer while she's in town?" Because there's no computer available. After all, the child goes to Sebastian Charter Junior High. On the second page, which is an addendum to what I had sent you, I kind of cut to the chase. In the middle of the page, I indicate something about equal protection under the law. Children in Indian River County come from households that are taxed for the fact that the property exists in the county. They don't ask whether they're elderly. They don't ask if they're single parents. They don't ask the religion or the race. They don't ask if the children are charter or non-charter school children. They're taught the same education as Florida Department of Ed asks us all to teach by the benchmarks and standards. We are tested by the same standards every child is, whether they're in any school throughout the state. My students at Sebastian Charter will be tested on the state civics exam. So what happens is that there's a statute that indicates millage is shared at the discretion of school boards. And I'd like to ask, and that's my last page, and I'll stop at that point, that you try to get behind the idea that the statute with the concept of at the discretion of school boards be completely eliminated. So the school boards are aware that when $2,000 goes out of the home and $2,000 comes back, that's something like an even amount, let the money follow the children. If it's $1,100, we should get $1,100, whether it's charter or non-charter. And at the discretion of school boards is pretty much, I think, nonsense. So I'm requesting that you work toward a kind of a must share evenly per child direction for the statute and help all the children in the school. And I want to thank you very much for letting me speak. And if you have any questions, oh, by the way, I have an invitation from Dr. McAdams, who's here, and she's the principal of our charter junior high, very successful school. And it's an invitation to please come and visit and say hello.
Great.
Do you have
Thank
any questions?
Questions, Senator?
And thank you, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I've been involved in legislation that's tried to create at least something closer to parity with traditional public schools and our charter public schools, because they are public schools.
That's correct. Thank you.
I know we do give charter schools, I'm curious just so I understand where you're coming from on this. You have a lot of latitude and freedom that other traditional public schools do not have. And that's sort of the beauty of charter. Mm-hmm. They're incubators and innovative. When we look at funding parity, are you coming from the place where they should receive the exact same amount of funding at public school, or do you think we just need to close that gap so we can continue to give you flexibility for the fear that if it's equal, then strings come attached and you have the same requirements as
well?
traditional?
Let's go backwards. Strings attached happen to be the state Florida Department of Education tests that all children take in the curriculum. So we're all equal on that basis. The fact is that I think that all the children, you're actually going to approach it both ways. PICO dollars or public education capital outlay funds amount to $80,000 or $85,000 for Sebastian Charter, and then it stops there. Yes, make up the gap of about $240,000. That would be an even balance. If PICO dollars were not given, and instead every child, it's a per child allocation, I'm suspecting, if my math is right, $1,187 per child. The charter should have received around $320,000. It didn't. It received $80,000. And I believe that the district did bring some money to the charter when about 100 children showed up, and they were basically escorted out by the police department because it was a little rowdy, but suddenly a check was sent to the charter schools. That was only a one-time thing. So having children come to a meeting and be rowdy is not what we want. We want equity in some way through proper funding.
It's okay to be a little rowdy, just not too much.
I have them. They're in my classroom.
Yeah.
And they're very cool.
Yeah.
But yes, I see it coming from either way. Make up the difference or eliminate the PICO and just go with equal funding per child. Right. Let the money follow the children, no matter where they are, because we're all guided by the same curriculum and the standards and major testing.
And allow the parental choice. I thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Very
Thank
good.
you. And I do agree with you. I think the money should follow the child. That's wherever the child is at is where the expense needs to be covered. So, we're going to look at that.
You come on into my classroom, they breathe, they eat, they do everything every other child does, and they compete in the same contest throughout the county. It's great, and their friends are in all the other schools. It's just a matter of being in a charter as compared to another school.
Exactly.
Thank
and
you.
we have had people come in the office and speak on your behalf as well. So we are looking at that to see what we can do to make it more fair.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Go back
Thank
to
you.
school.
Tell them we all said hello. You should have brought them all here. They would have had a government lesson.
And got to be a little bit rowdy every once in a while. So
Yeah, we can handle that. Now, the city might not appreciate having them packed in here, or the fire marshal either. Now we're going to move on to the St. Johns River Alliance. Mark Middlebrook.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Senator Altman. I want to start off by saying thank you for your previous support of the St. Johns River restoration projects that have gone through in the last few years. The metrics look pretty good, and we're real pleased with the results so far. Also wanted to let you know that the economic study that you funded in a recent session, that number will be out soon, probably before the session will be done. UNF, which is coordinating the study, won't tell me what the number is yet, but it's supposed to be significant. Just as a reminder, the St. Johns River Alliance is a unique group because we have 13 elected officials by charter that sit on our board, one from each of the main STEM counties, including Commissioner Zork, who you heard from before, sits on our board. And what we are a facilitator. We try to get people to the table to discuss difficult issues as it revolves around water and springs and other issues that are coming up. We held a water supply summit last February. All 12 of the 13 counties came. Some of their utility directors came, and no attorneys, which was amazing. So we were quite proud of that.
And a blessing.
Yes. One of the ideas that came out of that was to basically set up some sessions, education sessions for lawmakers, and we're having our first one on January 29th and 30th at Stetson University, designed really for legislators, particularly the newly elected legislators, that will talk about the basics of Florida's very complex water system. We'll have scientists, academic professors, and some legislators will be speaking as well. The invitation should be in your mail maybe today if you haven't seen them already. I have only one ask today, and it's not doesn't have any money attached to it. Senator John Thrasher was a big supporter of the St. Johns River and was a great help to help fund many projects. But what is Florida State University's gain is the river's loss. And we're deeply concerned that the St. Johns River Caucus, which he organized in 2010, needs a leader, needs somebody to step up and take it forward. This session, as we all know, is going to be involved dealing with water issues. They're complex. The St. Johns River is a key piece of the Central Florida Water Initiative, and we believe that the St. Johns River Caucus really needs to be very active this year, and we will hope that someone will step up and take that role. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions?
Oh, I think he's right on target because John Thrasher was huge. And, we know the Indian River Lagoon and the St. Johns are just intricately tied together. The same systems like the Everglades and Florida Bay. And so I agree with you, and I will definitely personally get in touch with our fellow members to make sure that that huge void is filled because we really appreciate what John Thrasher did. He was our rules chair, and it was his leadership. And I tell you, I give the St. Johns River Keeper and the Alliance and the caucus as really kind of turning the tide on environmental policy in the state. It was just that powerful and had that much influence, and it played a key role in our successes that we had last year. And I thank you for your involvement there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Next, we're going to hear from Tobacco Free Partners of Indian River County. Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you two of our partnership members. The first is Humberto Parada, and my other partner here with me today is Rob Johnson. I'm going to let them speak, but before they do, I'd like to thank you very much for passing the age restriction on electronic cigarettes last year. I know there's a lot more work that can be done because as our cigarettes, little cigars and snus and spit go down, the electronic cigarette use by youth has more than doubled. So those specifics for Indian River County have not been released yet. But for the state, I have a preliminary report that shows that the entire state is doing that. So let me introduce to you Humberto.
Hello. Hello. Good morning, first of all.
Good morning.
Hi. My name is Jesus Humberto Parada, and I am the president of SWAT at Bear Beach High School. I have been in charge of the club for 4 months now. We have done a lot of things. For example, on September, we were able to pass out SWAT information cards at the Bear Beach High School homecoming parade. And then we were able to create a letter to CVS thanking them for stop selling tobacco. We were able to sign that letter on our December meeting, which was this Monday. On our meeting this Monday, we were able to have the tobacco-free partnership members. And we were able to have our guest speaker, Bob Herbst, to talk about his life and what he went through, like for smoking and all that stuff. It was really a really good experience. We were able to see a lot of things. We were also able to see like inside his heart. Well, not inside his heart, but his body. It was really good. What we are doing at school is very important to us because we are saving our generation from becoming addicted to tobacco and fighting against those companies that are trying to sell tobacco. Many of these companies argue that they don't target young people, but like a laureate tobacco executive said, if you are really and truly not going to sell to children, you are going to be out of business in 30 years. If we can get your support, then we'll be able to inform adults about how this kind of companies target young people. We are fighting a winnable fight, and if we put more effort into this, we may be able to save younger generations from becoming addicted. And that's pretty much all I have.
Great. Thank you, Roberto.
Good morning. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm actually going to touch on a little bit of what Humberto had to say and share with you a personal story from my own life about how tobacco has affected me and my family. My name is Rob Johnson, and I was able to quit smoking cold turkey about 10 years ago. But my mother and grandmother weren't quite as fortunate to be able to quit smoking in their early 30s. And as a result of their tobacco use, they died incredibly horrible deaths. My grandmother suffered from COPD and bouts of pneumonia throughout her later years. And in the last 2 years of her life, she was unable to walk up a flight of steps without coughing. And sometimes she had to stop halfway up the steps just to sit down on the steps and catch her breath. The last 2 weeks of her life, she spent in the hospital on morphine to relieve the tension in her chest from the pain, from the coughing and heaving that she had to go through for every breath. And in the last couple of days of her life, she laid on her deathbed and held my hand and asked me to help her pray to God to take her home soon, so she wouldn't have to endure this pain anymore, all because of cigarette smoking. My mother didn't have it quite that easy. My mother had arterial sclerosis, which, as everybody knows, is a hardening of the arteries, which eventually led to kidney failure. She was on dialysis for the last year of her life, 3 times a week, which caused a lot of pain, vomiting, nausea. Finally, after about a year of that, she had a stroke on Christmas Eve. The stroke robbed her of her mobility, her dignity, and eventually her life. To say the least, the last few days of her life were absolutely miserable, all because of cigarettes. Now, I've only been affiliated with Tobacco Free Florida for a short time, but it's an organization that I hold very close to my heart. And it's an organization that's on the front lines every day fighting to help people stop smoking before they get to the level of addiction that my mother and my grandmother were at, and that actually I was at. And also, as I'm sure you're aware, as Umberto let you know, they work with young people like Umberto to help educate them about the tobacco use. And they don't do this for personal gain. They do this to help people stop smoking so they don't have to die the same undignified and unnecessary death as my mother and my grandmother. They need and they deserve all the support this community can give them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, I will, this is a very touchy issue in Tallahassee, and we have fought it. And, the tobacco-free as well as the electric cigarettes have become a big issue, and they are targeting the young people. When you have flavored tobacco-less flavored, and you have flavored electric vapors, what are used with electric cigarettes, there is no doubt. And so I think, Leslie, you've done a great job with the high schools and educating them that it's not cool to do it. And that's why kids do it, because they think it's cool to do it. And we need to do more on a state level to stop it, because the children are going to do it as long as they can do it, unless we put laws in place and require the retailers not to do it. It's amazing when you go into a retail shop and you see all the flavored tobacco-less products that's available to them. And people can't tell me that it's not targeting kids, because that's what they're doing. They're targeting kids.
Yes. I mean, we have the memos.
Exactly. So, I'm going to continue to help fight with you guys in Tallahassee to put more restrictions on that, because, cancer is just running rapid, and it is an epidemic at this point for many, many reasons. But that's a huge contributor to cancer, and so
absolutely
we need to continue to fight that. And I really do appreciate you, and I appreciate your story that you shared too, because it does bring it back home. So,
thank you so much. And just to put another little bug in your ear, Wayne talked about preemption for the rentals. Well, we have the same problem with the Clean Indoor Air Act. Each community cannot decide, where they want people to not smoke. And that really does tie our hands. So let's take a look at that.
Okay, I'll do that with you, Leslie, this year. Just get with me on it. Okay, Dr. Conway, there you, front and center. You're on next.
Good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Okay. Madam Chair Lady, Senator Altman, thank you for being here this morning, Senator Altman, because if you weren't here, and Senator Negron, talking to the Chair Lady would be like preaching to the choir on this issue. So thank you for being here, because you'll hear a presentation that she's heard many times, and she's going to continue to hear many times, and hopefully you will hear many times until you do something about it. You call it the vacation rentals. Mr. Bill Inge, that was before me, was talking about a tale of three children, and Wayne was talking about transient occupations. This is going to be a tale of three doctors dealing with what we call the transient motel that showed up in our neighborhood over 2 years ago. If you take a look at the package that you have on the first page, you have the zoning map of the southern part of Indian River County, and highlighted in the red block, that is our little subdivision. We're close to the Indian River St. Lucie County line, and right going all the way up in that entire yellow section, the zoning regulations for this entire area is called RS3, which is a residential zoning. If you take a look at this, the one little area that was marked in your second second page in your packet, this is what we call the White Surf subdivision in that little area that was on the zoning map. To give you a scale of the ownership of the various properties, I'm in the big block, the big rectangle, or at the bottom. Dr. Gilman, who's my neighbor to the north of me, he's a dentist. He's been in his property for over 16 years. I've been there for over 22 years. And Dr. Foreman, who's a radiologist, has been there for close to 30 years. Between the three of us, we have had a tenure in this area collectively of 75 years. Our properties are used exclusively for the housing of our families. 3 in the case of my property, 3 in the case of Dr. Gilman, and 2 in the case of Dr. Foreman. To give you an aerial view of what this looks like, just stand it down. There you go. Good. I am the 1.8 acre lot to the south. Dr. Gilman is a 0.7 acre lot just to the north of me, and Dr. Foreman is a 0.7 acre lot to the north of him. What we have in the small little block facing A1A is what we call our transient motel. The transient motel is owned by an attorney who lives in and works in China. Doesn't actually even live at the property. Senator Altman, I'm going to address a number of your issues, particularly the questions that you've raised about taxes and tax regulation and tax enforcement. If you'll have a look on I think it's second to last page in your packet right at the back, this gives you a schedule, and Mr. Comment, being an attorney, gave you the legal interpretation and impact of what these transient motels or vacation rentals give. I'm going to give you an economist's perspective because that is my area of expertise. What we have is between the Conway, Gilman, and Foreman residents, you have an occupation of 3.2 acres of oceanfront property. In 2013, our Indian River County tax appraiser's value of our collective properties was approximately $3.8 million. The transient motel is a 0.34 acre piece of property and has a market appraised value by the Indian River County Tax Assessor's Office at just under $500,000. In 2014, our proposed tax increase was a 59% tax increase, going from $3.8 million in tax in market value up to approximately 6 million. So that was a proposed 59% increase of market values up to, or in dollar terms, $2.2 million increase in our property values. And this addresses some of the issues that the lady from the Chamber of Commerce had mentioned, that she felt that property values were being deflated because of the general economy. That's a macro perspective. This is a micro perspective. At the bottom, the next block, under the taxes issue, the collective taxes that we paid, the 3 residents paid, was close to $44,000. The transient motel paid $7,000. The proposed increase in our taxes went up 23%. Fortunately, and thank you for the homestead exemption, my taxes only went up by 1%, whereas my doctor friends went up by 37% and 39% respectively, and the motels went up by 59%. This was prior to engaging the Indian River County, David Nolte's appraisal staff, to come down and have a look at the microeconomic impact of transient motels, or what you call vacation rentals. So I will go through these very, very quickly. Parking issues. The vacation transient motel in our neighborhood advertises on Vero Beach by Rentals, Rentals by Owner, every single website, that they can accommodate 16 to 20 people in this house. It's a 7,000 square foot house, and they indeed can pack in 20 people. Unfortunately, it sits on a 0.34 acre piece of property and cannot accommodate the parking. So on a slow day, you will have about 6 to 8 cars parked in the parking area, and then the overflow goes into the common area, which is not their own property, but the common area that is owned by the rest of the community. On a bad day, it is an industrial park in terms of a parking lot. This is what we have to deal with on a day. Further, so this was one issue that we had to face with a commercial parking lot in our neighbourhood. The next issue is part of building the motel. They didn't have the grade or the elevation to put in a swimming pool. So what they decided to do is they decided to bring in truckloads of fill and raise the entire elevation of the small 0.34 acre piece of property to accommodate a swimming pool, because every motel needs a swimming pool. The net result is this: what happens is whenever it rains, the runoff of the rain runs from across the common area into my property, and I have a nice new feature in my driveway called a pond. And we have a flooding issue. On Labor Day, this was another parking issue. Just to give you a picture worth 1,000 words, there's the parking issue again. At any one particular time on an average day in a single family residence, we have between 12 and 14 cars overflowing from a driveway into the common area, and in fact sometimes even in the road. Now, the vacation rent, this is the one vacation rental or transient motel in our neighbourhood. What has now happened is just up the road, about a mile up the road, taking on the lead of 19 cars parked in a single family residence, another neighbour of ours on A1A decided there's too much overhead in running a vacation rental. We have to get people in to change sheets, etc., and clean out the place. What we will do is we will transform our home into what we call a wedding motel and park 39 cars with valet service on A1A and shuttle people up to our main house and park the 39 cars on A1A and just rent out the house for a day for a wedding reception instead of running a commercial motel. So essentially down in our area in the south part of the county, we have had what we would call the total compromise of the residential zoning. We are no longer a residential area, we are a commercial housing area. Now, there's the final issue that and this was all articulated to the property appraiser's office, and the property appraiser's office came down and took a look at this. This next one, you can take that off. Senator Altman, in your last package, if you could just zoom in a little bit closer. If you could just take that in a little bit closer. Oh, should I say further out, Wayne? Further out, sorry. Senator Altman, $5 for a guess as to what exactly that is.
$5, let me think.
To the average person, that would look like the moon. Unfortunately, one of our greatest natural resources in our area is our wildlife, and I have to compliment your colleagues and yourself for the preservation of our wildlife, particularly our sea turtles. What you saw in the previous slide was not the moon. You saw in the previous slide the light coming from this particular motel, because when you have 20 people in a little lanai area with a lot of alcohol, after 9 and 10 o'clock at night, there's quite a level of imbibing. And following any kind of rules in terms of turtle protection is just incidental. So what you have is a turtle nest right in front on the beach with hatchlings being disorientated as a result of the lighting and activities going on there at the property. So as a result of this, we've articulated all of these various different problems: the parking, the drainage, the flooding, the noise. I won't even go into the noise issue of 65 decibels, etc., etc. The net result of all of this is that the property appraisers came down to our property and they scratched their head and probably shed a little tear when we weren't looking. And then what they did is they chopped off they revised our property market values by 3.6 million. They took it down from 6 million to a level of 3.6, chopping off 2.4 million. So from a situation in terms of our market values going up by 60%, not knowing that there was a transient motel a la vacation rental in our neighbourhood, when they saw the debilitating and the deleterious effects of all of this activity, our market values went down by 40%. In my case, 37%. I lost 1.2 million in property value. Dr. Gilman lost over $500,000 or 43%. Collectively, the four of us lost about 40%. In terms of taxes collected, Senator Altman, you asked the question, do they pay the sales tax and do they pay the betting tax? The next question to that is, what kind of effect does it have on the residents paying their taxes? Well, the Indian River County gladly lost $11,000 in taxes from us because of the downgrading of the quality of our property. Now, I would like to convey to you a sentiment of the three of us, and we would put ourselves in not Tea Party Republicans, but quite conservative Republicans. And we've heard this argument over and over again that individual property rights must be respected. We agree with that. But individual property rights, and particularly individual commercial property rights, do not supersede individual quiet enjoyment property rights. And that is what the existing bill does. It elevates private property rights and the right of the individual to utilize their property as they see fit, to the detriment of neighbours and residents' individual quiet enjoyment of their property rights. That was not reconciled or looked after in the bill. The next question is, we went to David Nolte, the property appraiser, and said, Mr. Nolte, do you realise what has happened over here? You've lost $11,000 in taxes, and 75% of the taxes goes to the school board in Indian River County. So we are actually impacting our children's future in this to a large extent. To my utter surprise, Mr. Nolte was not surprised. And I said to him, there are 132 vacation rentals advertised on one website in Indian River County. So if we just multiply that 11,000 by, let's say, 100, of 100 residents that come in and make the same arguments, we've got parking problems, we've got noise problems, we've got turtle problems, we've got all of these different problems. That's $11 million in tax revenue that you've lost. The same thing, you can say you've lost close to $30 million in property values. Now, how do we solve this? Well, I would not like you to think that...
Up here,
sorry?
Are we getting close, Dr.
Yes.
Conway? Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I want to make sure you have time, but I still have a lot of other speakers behind you.
Madam Chair Lady, this is actually quite an emotional issue because we live this day in and day out.
I know.
So when you proposed the repeal, you felt that this was a solution that you gave back the ability of the various local governments to regulate this and rectify the problem. Unfortunately, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Unfortunately, Indian River County, unlike our colleagues at Vero Beach, in Vero Beach, do not have a grandfather clause in. There's no grandfather legislation in Indian River County to address these problems and and rectify these problems. They do not enforce commercial fire regulation. They do not enforce safety regulations or anything else that the state enforces for commercial properties. But most importantly, unlike in Vero Beach, there is no will at the county to properly regulate these entities. Apart from the non-grandfathering, there is no will. The Code Enforcement Board at Indian River County does its best to enforce its codes. And these are the professionals. Unfortunately, should I say, the code department, this is the actual code officers, do their best in terms of interpreting what codes they do have on the book, which is very, very deficient. But the political appointees at the Indian River County, namely on the Code Enforcement Board, cut them off at the knees. Because, to quote Senator Davies made a remark. He says, these vacation rentals are great, because what they do is they bring more people into our county to fill up the airboats. So the view of Senator Davies, and unfortunately the rest of his colleagues are not here, is that tourism is the greatest asset of Indian River County. We beg to differ. The greatest asset, and it's a deteriorating asset and it's a diminishing asset, is the quality of life in Indian River County. And we call upon you to enhance and stabilise our quality of life by going one step further than what Mr. Comment said. Don't give back the authority. Repeal this act entirely. This is a classic case of what you took classic Coke and came out with new Coke, and it didn't work. This needs to be repealed in toto, and we ask that you do that.
Thank you, Dr. Conway, and I know you're very passionate about this issue, and we'll continue to work on this and try to do something, because you're right, your property rights are being violated, and this is an issue of a quality of life for you and your family as well, that is property right next door. So we'll continue to work on this with you. Senator Altman.
Oh, fantastic presentation. Very well done. I think you really encapsulated the issue extraordinarily well.
Okay, we're going to move on to Community Food and Outreach Center, Annabella Robertson. Is Annabella here? Is she here? Okay. We'll skip that one, and we'll go on to Christina Kaiser.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Devereaux Community-Based Care is one of 19 community-based organizations throughout the state of Florida that is charged with the delivery of child welfare services to individual communities. We coordinate that system here in Indian River County and also in Martin, St. Lucie, and Okeechobee counties. We currently operate at a caseload ratio of about 17 children per every one dependency case manager. The Council on Accreditation, by contrast, suggests a total maximum caseload of 12-to-1. That's 27% fewer children than we should be seeing on our caseloads. The Department of Children and Families recognizes that this is not just a local issue. This is actually a problem throughout the state of Florida. And so it has submitted a legislative budget request that includes approximately $15.7 million carve out for community-based care, about half of that for the reduction of caseloads. Okay, so why should this matter to you? Why should this matter to any of us? High caseloads create horrible case manager turnover, and that in turn High caseloads. Oh, hello, Senator Negron. Yes. Good to see you too. I'm sorry. High caseloads create high case manager turnover, and that impacts directly the children, the length of time that they're staying in out-of-home care, very expensive out-of-home care, and also on the length and duration of time that a child stays in the system without ever reaching permanency. These are the children who age out of foster care without ever making any permanent connections. They are the kids who are having poor outcomes in physical and mental health, as well as limited academic success. Additional funding to reduce caseloads will allow us to continue with successful prevention and interventive programs, diversion programs and services that prevent children from entering care in the first place. Without the ability to fund these services, more children will enter care, caseloads will continue to climb, and with them, the long-term costs to the state of Florida and to its taxpayers. Devereaux Community-Based Care, along with the Shared Services Alliance of Okeechobee and the Treasure Coast, and in coordination and partnership with the Florida Coalition for Children and all of our community-based care sisters throughout the state of Florida, ask you to support the department's legislative budget request, particularly as it relates to community-based care. Thank you. Oh, and my 9-year-old told me, remember to say please, Mama. Please.
Thank you, Christina.
Good advice.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Welcome, Senator Negron. I know you're busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come down here, too. Okay, next we're going to have Mary Jane, Dr. Mary Jane. Now, I'm not going to pronounce it again because I messed it up last time. So your husband was here earlier.
Right.
He did a great job.
Oh,
So he's hard act follow now.
Yes, I was going to say that. First of all, I want to thank each of you for being here to hear this, because not only my presentation but others that are here today are giving you important information. If you look in the packet that was prepared there, I don't know if you got this, but I've given each of you one of these DVDs. And I'll show the audience also. It's available on the internet. You can get it. And the reason I'm here is because of a major quality of life issue, as well as the assault on the Fourth Amendment. And if you take the time in the next month or so, maybe during your Christmas holidays, to look at this DVD, you'll see what I'm about to say supports it. And Mr. Josh Del Sol, who did this DVD, is a Canadian, and at the end of the DVD, you'll see him with a group of children. And he says, the reason I am doing this and I made this film is to improve the quality of life for future generations. And about 3 months ago in Vero Beach, this movie was shown. And it was the first time I'd ever seen it. And I have to say, it really affected me. It took my breath away, actually. Our Fourth Amendment states that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The smart grid, which is what this film is all about, being forced upon homeowners by the federal government, subjugates the home and those living there to a clear violation of the protections afforded them by the Fourth Amendment, by placing smart meters on every home and business, replacing the analog meter, all under the guise of saving meter reading time and money, and penalizing those who choose not to participate with a $13 monthly fee. The utility companies can harvest data and information about a home and its inhabitants. All our new appliances, fully equipped with chips that communicate with the smart meter, are monitoring use and time of use, and especially lack of use, or what could be called the no one is home, come on in symptom. And we are bringing a new slant on in-home surveillance, uninvited by the home or business owner. All are a clear violation of privacy, a sacred part of America's heritage that our forefathers fought and died to preserve. Although our Florida Power and Light has allowed us to keep our analog meters on the Treasure Coast, homeowners are faced with increased power bills. Initially, 38,000 homeowners in the Florida Power and Light service area chose to keep their analog meters. However, since June of 2014, this year, Florida Power and Light charged each homeowner with an analog meter an initial fee of $95 to do so, along with a $13 month surcharge added to our bills. This amounts to extortion by a monopoly. As a result, many folks could not afford these charges, and now 6,000 homeowners have kept their analog meters. We need to have legislation that allows folks to choose an analog meter for their home without penalties. We need to place the health, safety, and privacy of the consumer above the greed of corporations and the mandates of agencies of the federal government that are not even accountable to the people. While time does not permit my elaborating the hazards of meter radiation or fires, some of which occurred in St. Lucie County, I have a DVD that fully explains all of these issues. This is an excellent and has won several awards as well. According to Cortez and Knight versus Honeywell Building Solutions Corporations, it's a court case, 8,000 individuals have suffered loss to their homes in Florida who were in the Florida Power and Light service area. This is due to fires. In addition, I can convey more information to your office if needed. Numerous counties and cities across the state have passed resolutions allowing citizens to opt out of these meters. About 30 states have citizen-based action against smart meters. Florida has 2 organizations concerned with this issue, StopSmartMetersFlorida.org and MicrowaveChasm.org. And lastly, I leave you with a question. If we can choose our cable company, our Wi-Fi source, or whether to have a landline or cell phone as our main source of communication, or not to have any of these, why is it that my home, my business, my personal space can be dictated to by a power company? Our Fourth Amendment is your Fourth Amendment. Protect us, please. There is no law that protects any utility from selling the information they gather from our homes and businesses. And recently, this is a kind of a side thing. My husband being a teacher from New York, we get the Nice Teacher magazine and other publications. And in the back of this magazine today, which is the December issue, there's a big article about wireless technology calls for caution. And it says, once thought to be safe at levels that did not heat human tissue, scientists and doctors are now focusing on biological effects from low-level exposures, especially for pregnant women. While scientists continue to examine the issue, studies show altered brain development in children whose mothers were exposed during pregnancy. Effects include disruption in learning, memory, behavior. An essential takeaway message: your proximity to wireless devices is an important factor. Keep your distance from wireless routers and equipment, especially when pregnant. Avoid use of cell phones in cars, trains, elevators, and they give you some websites to look at. So the fact that this issue has reached a major publication for teachers is, to me, an amazing thing. So I ask that you look into this issue. I'm not a lawyer and don't know the exact nature on how to attack this issue. I do know that several people have gone to the Public Service Commission, and there was testimony about the various hazards of these meters. But to date, the Commission has chose not to act in any way, and I don't know really how accountable those Public Service Commissioners are to the actual citizens of the state of Florida. So I hope you will, in the next month or so, take a look at that video. Because, in a short presentation like this, there's so much there, is all I can say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, I understand, because I'm trying to get Dr. Ingwe, I understand you want to speak about All Aboard Florida, too. Would you like just to take another minute while you're up here? Because
right.
We've got a lot to go through.
That would, just 30 seconds. Please do not, my feeling is, do not allocate any state funds or our taxpayer money for the railroad. And I don't know how this could be accomplished, but I think a message has to be sent to Governor Scott. He was able to squash the railroad the last time, the one to Tampa, I think. And I think he has to be on board with this as well. And I'm not absolutely sure where he stands on this issue. But it's not that we don't want a railroad. We don't want it through our community. And if there are alternatives, somebody else recently said there's 3 alternatives that were considered in that report, and apparently the 2 other alternatives would be much more favorable to the citizens of the Treasure Coast and Space Coast. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, next we're going to hear from Jane Meeks with the Florida Art Therapy.
Hello. Hey. Thank you for allowing me a voice for an issue that is close to my heart. I am an art therapist, board certified and registered. And I'm here to talk to you about Florida's public health service need. As you know that only 26% of the people in the state of Florida in need of mental health services are receiving them. And we have a group of therapists, art therapists, who come out of a top-notch program, one of the top-notch programs in the United States in Tallahassee. and they walk into a job profession that is not licensed in our state. 5 states have already passed licensure. Let me explain to you what art therapy is and kind of erase the word art for a minute. We are mental health counselors who facilitate a client in using art mediums, art materials to create something, and the end result of that creative process is a piece of artwork. And in that artwork is a bundle of emotions, of pictures of things that have happened to them that they may not even have words for. And this, you may think of this as children, but I've worked with people in their 80s. And through this process, we lead them through talking about feelings, looking at evidence of things they may not even know they had within them. And it can cut very deep in them. By processing these things, we can deal with all of the issues that are presented in the DSM as far as anxiety, depression, grief, loss, anger, abuse, trauma. You know what I'm talking about. So this is an effective tool. It's so effective that it cuts oftentimes deeply within, because a picture is truly worth 1,000 words. And these people, we are trained as art therapists. We are master's level professionals, and we are certified by the Art Therapy Board, a national board. So we are trained to keep people safe when they're going through this process. It's kind of like sometimes a picture and something that is said in processing could just penetrate like a laser into a person and open them up emotionally. We are trained to take them back to a cognitive level, to keep them safe, and to bring closure to what's happening during a session. There are people that are using art therapy right now that are not trained in this area, and they have not gone through a master's level program in art therapy. And these people do not understand the powerful tool, the laser that they're holding in their hands as they go through this process. So sometimes people are being victimized in this process by us allowing no licensure, nothing to govern the use of this type of modality of therapy. You have a branch of art therapists that are being sought after. We have 5 new managed care companies that have just sprung up this year that were seeking art therapists. There are no standards for what an art therapist is that they can look at, no licensure standards. So they are hiring people that just have mental health training and call themselves art therapists, because we use art material when we're working with people. And we are putting a at-risk population at risk by exposing them. And there is really no way to stop this from happening. We've self-governed this. When we've heard of something like this going on, we've tried to self-govern it ourselves. So we are really advocating licensure by the state so that you can protect people who are experiencing being led into these types of therapy with untrained professionals. We also feel that the benefits of this, that you would be protecting the clients, that you would also be able to, if we are licensed, then services can hire us, because then we are third-party reimbursable by insurance companies. There are over 300 art therapists in this state, and many of them are not employed as art therapists because of the lack of licensure. This will, in turn, increase the amount of mental health clients that can be seen. And also, it will bring income for the state.
We need to speed up here, Senator Altman has a question so far of what you've asked. So can we interrupt you there and let him go ahead and ask his question?
Certainly, I was going to try to leave time for questions.
Thank you for the promotion.
You're welcome.
I agree with you and understand, and there's some other professions we have similar problems with. Yes. Actually, I did a bill on one of them last session. But here's what we have. We have a situation over in the House where they've made a strong emphasis of deregulation. and actually are looking at professions and trying to unregulate them. As a matter of fact, about 3 years ago, we had a huge floor fight between the architects and interior designers. It was a similar effort. So even if we agree with you on the Senate side, and even if Representative Mayfield agree with you, we have a huge uphill battle in our efforts to provide some regulatory scheme to a number of professions that probably need it. I had a request last year in interpreters. I don't know if you followed when Barack Obama went to South Africa, a guy claimed to be an interpreter who really wasn't an interpreter, and it's kind of comical but also sad. But that really raised a lot of awareness of how we need to have interpreters. If people are going to the doctor with folks that claim to be interpreters that aren't, and I mean it's even a life and death situation, we failed, unfortunately. But I have a question in your situation. I wonder if there's a scenario where we can create a process where art therapists could fall under community mental health, licensed community mental health therapist, where if you are in a situation where you need some sort of behavioral therapy or treatment, that at least we could say that these licensed community mental health therapists has some sort of relationship or oversight, that might be another way that we could get to your issue and problem.
That does help with the issue, the safety issue, to some degree. I am both a licensed mental health counselor and an art therapist. The training is more than, for an art therapist, we have the whole visual element of training as well as the verbal. So there is a bit of a difference, but it does help in getting reimbursement and being able to use my services. However, it doesn't meet the needs that the state is looking at, with only 26% of the people being able to have mental health services, when art therapy is a great service to offer for groups and for managed care companies that are seeking groups.
Madam Chair, I'm Vice Chair of Children and Families. I'd be more than happy to
work on
that and have a meeting with you and see what we can do to help.
Thank you. We are seeking sponsorship, and
okay, great.
Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
We will follow up with information for all of you.
Great. Thank you for coming. Okay, next we're going to hear from Susan Mill and Phyllis Fry. Are you guys coming up together about Olive Board, Florida? Okay.
That's okay. Whatever.
Okay, and we're really running tight.
Right. I've been scratching off sentences as I've been sitting there. I just want to say thank you to all of you for everything you've done to help us stop the train. We are loosely attached with Florida Not All Aboard here in Indian River County. I also want to say to all of our elected officials here, we thank everyone for helping us stop the train, and we feel blessed that we're in a county that can't be bought out by crony capitalists for the sake of the safety of their residents. A couple things we're going to do. We're knocking it up a notch in terms of communication this coming year. We want to start spending more time with some connected people in Tallahassee and in Washington, D.C., and so you all will be hearing from us a lot more. We're going to be sending a letter next week to the governor and Secretary Prasad regarding some information that we've been developing over the last few months. It's information we haven't been sharing as much as all of our other arguments, so I just want to touch on that briefly today. As we've said all along, 32 high-speed rail trains plus a minimum of 22 freight is a disastrous situation. 3 freight companies in the country are fighting the combination of freight and high-speed rail on the same tracks. And in fact, Union Pacific has said they will never allow speeds over 79 miles an hour on their West Coast tracks for passenger. CSX in upstate New York is saying they do not want to share their freight tracks with high-speed passenger, and the only thing they'll agree to is to require an entirely new rail line to separate freight and passenger. Conrail has said the same thing. It's dangerous, and there's service degradation resulting from a combination of freight and passenger service. We see in Texas, high-speed rail is being proposed. They are they are responding to a draft environmental impact study, just as we just did. Only they're lucky, their tracks will be new. They're looking at routes. And one of the most important keys here, when you compare what they're looking at to what we're dealing with, is that they're projecting of their 240-mile route, which is almost identical to our route here, Miami to Orlando, that more than 100 miles of that route will be newly elevated, built track so that it impacts communities less. One thing that's been said about the California situation where they're doing high-speed rail, Congressman Nuns from California said, it's clear that high-speed rail is not about jobs. It is about corruption, public deception, and bureaucratic experimentation, which is exactly what we're seeing here because this is an experiment. This type of rail has never been done before. So we're making a big effort to push this train west. If they want to run freight or high-speed rail, they cannot, and everybody realizes it's outrageously dangerous to do it here. So we're going to be asking them to make some statements soon to the public, or and put their position out there so that they can say that they're sure that there are not going to be more accidents and catastrophes with hazardous materials on the same tracks as high-speed rail, et cetera. So you'll be hearing from us, and we want your help in getting the governor and the Secretary of Transportation to get up front with this and help us stop the train. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Susan. I appreciate all the work you guys have been doing on this as well. Okay, Phyllis.
Good morning, and thank you for your time and patience. I will be brief. I respect your time. Since February of 2014, I wanted to cover some points that were not made by Commissioner Solari or Ms. Meal regarding All Aboard Florida. And since February of 2014, an educational process began in 6 southeast counties in Florida through the efforts of Florida Not All Aboard. And in those 11 months, we united the Treasure Coast. We gathered over 40,000 petition signatures, 30 resolutions, and countless letters of opposition from cities, counties, and our legislative delegates. Thank you very much for your support on this. We have hospital and emergency services, many homeowners associations, civic organizations, the marine industry, the League of Cities, culminating in over 8,000 comments to the Federal Railway Administration. I bring this to your attention to demonstrate what tens of thousands of people can do when they are united under one voice to protect our safety, our welfare, and the right to local decision-making regarding the future development of our counties and cities, home rule of law. We continue to cite the many negative impacts that increased rail operations will have upon us because our research shows that not only will we be living with this nightmare, we'll be dying from it. Nowhere will the impact of All Aboard Florida have a more dire effect than upon our safety. I've attached a safety statistical response with links, sources, and data that addresses the major risks that confront us and why we must make this a priority. An action item, in the interest of time, I'll highlight but a few. High-speed rail passenger operations at 110 miles an hour, operating 32 times a day with closure rates of over 220 miles per hour in the same corridor, only a few feet away from FEC's freight that carries explosive hazmat through densely populated towns. Over 349 crossing is an experiment, and it's never been attempted anywhere else in the world. 52 trains a day, 349 crossings, that's 18,149 crossing closings, and that's 600% increase for the opportunity for fatalities to occur. From the FRA database, in the past 15 years, there have been 221 fatalities along the FEC corridor, and that's without high-speed operations. This accounts for 32% of all rail events in Florida. As for the random crossings, there have been 171 deaths, which FDOT calls, quote, epidemic in our area, end quote. Southeastern Florida has the highest number of accidents in the U.S. because we have the highest number of at-grade crossings. All Aboard Florida has zero operating experience, zero. in passenger operations, and yet it is proposing this unprecedented project, placing profit over lives. Because All Aboard Florida would be an interstate operation, the Federal Railway Administration cannot enforce regulations, but can only make recommendations. All Aboard Florida refused to comply with safety recommendations in Part 1 and 2 of the FRA on-site engineering field reports and has submitted no safety guidelines or compliance reports in writing. In closing, the FRA can only enforce regulations for trains operating in excess of 111 miles per hour. The Florida Department of Transportation has no regulations for trains operating at 110 miles per hour because it's never been done before in Florida. Clearly, there is a jurisdictional loophole that needs to be closed. The public has the right to know, and we have the duty to determine who has enforceable jurisdiction over our safety. Now that the risks are being increased exponentially through proposed simultaneous passenger and freight operations, this issue must be addressed as highest priority. I understand we can't immediately enact legislation at this juncture, but I'm proposing a joint appointment with our delegates at the earliest possible date for further discussion for not allowing All Aboard Florida project to advance until our alternate and safer routes, such as those adjacent to the CSX or I-95 corridor, are considered. We look forward to the future meeting where we can develop strategies and coordinate with our state and federal officials to carry a unified message to Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Fry.
Quick
Senator
question.
Altman.
I know we're pushed for time. I couldn't help but notice in your report, it was very thorough, 32% of rail accidents and deaths occur in southeast Florida. Mm-hmm. Now, is that 32% of the deaths in the state of Florida or 32% in the nation?
In the state of Florida.
In the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me correct. I'm so sorry. There are two numbers there. There's a 50% number, and that is in the state of Florida, and 32% on a national level. I'm sorry.
So 32% of all deaths. That's staggering.
It is. I mean, it is a very dangerous situation. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. And tell you guys have really done a lot of work bringing this to the attention of the citizens. And, we can't thank you enough because this is a big issue for our community. What Miami and Palm Beach and Orlando is going to benefit from is going to be the detriment of our economic development and quality of life in Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River, and to Brevard in some extent. So, please keep us informed. Mm-hmm. Let us know how your progress is going and what we need to do in helping you at the state level, because we're just 3 counties here that's going to be fighting the rest of the state.
That's right.
On it.
And I think we can win, and I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to move on to Samantha Saxton with the Pace Center for Girls. Is she here? Okay, we'll move on then to Marine Industries Association of the Treasure Coast. April Price. Is April here? Okay, we'll move on. Democratic Women's Club of Indian River County, Linda McDonald. Is Linda here?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Representative Mayfield, Senator Altman, and Senator Negron. Thank you for letting us speak. I'd like to introduce, to bring up some of the issues that are important to the Democratic Women's Club of Florida, my Vice President Kathy Oskolski, who will speak to health care.
Thank you, Linda. And it's a pleasure to see you again, Representative Mayfield and Senator Negron. You've met with us this last couple of years when we've gone to Tallahassee to meet in our legislative session, and we'll include you, Senator Altman, in our future meetings. It's an oversight on our part that we haven't been meeting with you as well. I'd like to talk about our ongoing interest in expanding health care for the 1 million Floridians who are not receiving coverage under the Affordable Health Care Act because we have not endorsed Medicaid expansion in our state. And I want to thank Senator Negron in particular for your efforts in the 2013 session when you put put forward a valiant effort to come up with a Florida solution to that. As we all know, we have about 1 million residents who are not covered. We would receive about $5 billion a year from the federal government to help fund that. And we have yet another opportunity in this upcoming legislative session to take on that issue. I noted yesterday that there is an association, hospital and healthcare associations that have brought forward a creative idea called the Healthy Florida Works Plan. And so I'm hopeful that this delegation will work again toward bringing a solution to the uninsured Floridians and to help us bring that forward. And I would also like to mention that in terms of those who are concerned about the cost factor, the fact that in, I guess, the year 2020, Florida would only be receiving a 90% reimbursement versus 100% reimbursement. I would like to remind us all that we're paying for this health care anyway. Through uninsured, and I know you know this, right? When our uninsured go to the hospital and our uninsured are not having their health care needs met, they get sicker and have more expensive health care outcomes. So I would encourage you to work in whatever way you can to bring this issue forward. I think it would be great for our state and good for our county. And lastly, on health care, I would say that every time I read something about our local Indian River Medical Center and the difficulties that the medical staff are having in negotiating with the district on expenses, I see how the Affordable Health Care Act and the uninsured are impacting our local hospitals. So we're getting a lesson in healthcare economics up close and personal in our Indian River County. So I hope that you'll work with us on that. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you in March.
Great. Thank you, Senator Altman.
I just want to say, go ahead. I'll let y'all finish. Sure. I just want to say I agree wholeheartedly. And I did have a question, more of a detail, and I'm probably Senator Negron can answer it because I'm convinced he knows more about the budget than anybody in the legislative process. I thought it was more like, and I agree, the 10% match, 90% reimbursement far exceeds any economic impact negative to the state. It's still a positive. But I was under the impression it was closer to $15 million a year. I know she mentioned, $15 billion a year, and she mentioned $5 billion. I was curious.
No, I think you're right. I think it's $50 billion.
Okay. Actually, the $5 billion, it's estimated about $5 billion to Florida.
Per year.
Right, per year.
But $50 billion.
I think the 15 you're thinking about, because we had done it in a 3-year project. And so you're both actually right. You know, it's 15 total, but it's $5 billion per year approximately.
Up to 2020.
Right.
Because that's further out. I thought the 10% match came sooner, but it doesn't come.
No, the numbers stay in the high 90s for several years, and then phase out, as you said, to 90%.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to introduce Lainey Frame to speak to another of our issues. She's also our Vice President.
Good morning. I'd like to talk to you about the Equal Rights Amendment, which I know you all know passed the United States Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives on March 22nd, 1972. It was then sent to the states, where it was ratified by 35 states, but we needed 38 because there's a 3/4 requirement. It's therefore not included in the U.S. Constitution yet. The ERA has been reintroduced in every session of Congress since 1982, yet Florida remains one of 3 states blocking the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. So the obvious question is why? Who could be against equality for all? We've never really got a clear reason why Florida has been rejecting the ERA. Unlike other bills that cross your desk, ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment requires no funding and would provide a legal remedy against sex discrimination for both women and men. It would guarantee that the rights affirmed by the U.S. Constitution are held equally by all citizens regardless of their sex. The RA would clarify the legal status of sex discrimination for the courts, where decisions still deal inconsistently with such claims. Also, for the first time, sex would be considered a suspect classification, just as race currently is. The ERA would send a strong preemptive message that the Constitution has zero tolerance for sex discrimination. The ERA is sometimes called the Women's Equality Amendment to emphasize that women have historically been granted fewer rights than men, and that equality can be achieved by raising women's legal rights to the same level of constitutional protection as men's. Without the ERA and the Constitution, the statutes and the case law that have been produced major advances in women's rights are in danger of being ignored, weakened, or reversed. Without the ERA as a constitutional amendment, the simple majority in the Congress can amend or repeal anti-discrimination laws, the administration can haphazardly enforce such laws, and the Supreme Court can use the intermittent standard to review and permit certain regressive forms of sex discrimination. As its sex-neutral language makes clear, the ERA's guarantee of equal rights would protect both men and women. The ERA is necessary to make our own Constitution conform with the promise engraved over the entrance to the Supreme Court: equal justice under law. Public support for a constitutional guarantee of equal rights for men and women is overwhelming, yet our state has not ratified this important amendment. This is a situation you can rectify. I ask you to seriously consider introducing, sponsoring, promoting, and voting for the Equal Rights Amendment Bill in the upcoming legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you. You're going to talk about the environment, Linda?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Just very quickly, it's come to our attention that the regulatory panel, I think of the Environmental Protection Agency, recently voted 3-2 to cut energy efficiency goals by 90% in the state of Florida and allow solar rebate programs to expire. This was lobbied for by most of the major energy companies, and we find it to be an alarming trend. In addition, in this current legislative session, there is a bill sponsored by Senator Darren Soto and Senator Dwight Bullard to prohibit fracking in Florida. And we would urge all of you to support that bill. Fracking uses toxic chemicals mixed with clean water to fracture rock and shale to liberate natural gas. And last but not least, the Florida Land and Water Legacy Amendment passed this last November, and we were very happy to see that. Our concern is that the money set aside for this from the real estate document tax would be used for those kinds of projects, but other money is taken away as a consequence, and we would like to see all those monies that are earmarked come to projects in addition to current funding. So that's all. And I have just a copy of our platform that I would like to leave with you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just leave it right there. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're coming to the end of our before the public input. Again, is Kate Cotner. And Kate, I'm sorry, I just noticed you were at the bottom of that. We could have had you with the county.
That's okay. Not a problem. I'm here filling in for Commissioner Peter O'Brien to talk about the Indian River Lagoon Counties Collaborative. This organization was formed in September of 2013, and it's a multi-county based advisory group, which is comprised of one county commissioner from each of the 5 counties that are affected of the lagoon, which goes from Volusia County down to Martin County. The purpose of it really is to provide the general public, state and federal agencies, the Florida legislature, and the member counties with a body to present a variety of issues that will affect the lagoon and the watersheds that lead out to the lagoon. The collaborative will strive to advance cooperative opportunities, to address issues harming the water quality of the lagoon, to propose solutions for improvement, and to seek state and federal funding to assist in the implementation of the solutions. During the meetings held over the last year, member counties have identified hundreds of millions of dollars of potential projects to reduce nutrients entering into the Indian River Lagoon. The level of state fundings for TMDL projects in the past has been woefully short to adequate to assist in these projects. Recognizing that the focus of the 2015 legislature will be the statewide policies on water quality, the collaborative voted unanimously to request the legislature to fund a minimum of $300 million for statewide TMDL projects. In addition, it is requested that the legislature ensure that the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is adequately staffed to process these applications. Apparently that's been a concern or a complaint, I guess, is that they don't really move very, very quickly. And each collaborative commissioner will be making a similar request to the respective delegation, just so you know.
Great. Thank you, Kate.
Any questions that I can bring back to the Commissioner?
I think those are excellent requests. If we could get those in writing to include in our packet.
Absolutely.
That'd be good.
Okay. I will email them to your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, now we actually have made up some time here, so we're going to go through the public cards that were filled out, and I have a note on here that Pam Lampson, is she? Sorry, Dan. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Dan Lampson. I'll be very brief, I promise. I'm the Executive Director of the Indian River Neighborhood Association. I stood before you last year asking for the state's preemption on short-term rentals to be lifted and for home rule to be restored to local jurisdictions. That hasn't happened despite the strong support we received from all of you up there, and we thank you for that. SB 356 and HB 307 in the 2014 legislative session started out as good, strong bills. They would have enabled municipalities to regulate their own zoning, including duration and frequency of stay. What passed instead was a partial bill that gave more rights to local governments. They could not, however, regulate duration or frequency, which is really pretty much really important in this fight. As you heard, Dr. Conway gave a great presentation earlier. And, established neighborhoods are being torn apart by the practice of renting out homes by the day or the week. And earlier in the day, Representative Mayfield, you made a very good point about local enforcement. And we've been working hard on that issue in the city of Vero Beach, but at the county level, there's not much we can do because they don't have a law, and if they wanted to make a law, they couldn't even about this. For at least the duration and frequency. I mean, their parking or whatever, the sound, that kind of thing they can enforce. In our cities and counties, short-term rentals are happening, and there's nothing that can be done. And the IRNA strongly encourages you to work on this issue again this session. We hope that you will make this issue a legislative priority for as many sessions as it takes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan, very much. Okay, next we'll have Gene Waddell.
Thank you, folks. I'm going to bring an issue before you again that I've brought before, but I just need to keep it in front of you, and that is the capital outlay for charter schools. The enrollment for students in the state of Florida is increasing. However, the graph for traditional school students is decreasing. So one's going up, one's going down, and that difference is charter schools are growing, home schools growing, private schools are growing, but what hasn't been addressed is the growth in charter school enrollment and the pot of money that is available to charter schools for their capital needs. The difference in our county is about $400 for a charter student to about $1,200 for a public school student. So there's a great disparity. The charter parents pay the same tax that $1,200 is paid out of, but they're getting no benefit for it. And we're just looking for fairness for the charter students, that they get their share of those tax dollars that are already being levied so that they can keep their buildings up and build new buildings to accommodate the increase in enrollment that we're all having. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about, every year there's one or two charter schools that abuse the public money that they are given to educate kids. I would like to recommend to you that those one or two schools every year that mishandle the dollars, the legislature goes back and makes new rules that the other 99 of us have to deal with when we're doing the right thing. And just as all public officials in the state of Florida have to produce a public official bond when they get into office, I would like for you to consider that all charter board members also have to produce that bond. Bonding companies give it out like candy. It's no big deal. It's a $25,000 bond, and it isn't going to cost anybody a lot of money, but is the state of Florida or a school board has to end up getting the guts to go after these people. And if you have a bond that where I've misappropriated some money, and then bonding company starts coming after my house and my cars personally, I'm not going to do that stuff anymore. And it's only going to take a couple of those cases before charter schools that are tending to do that stop doing it, because they're not going to jeopardize their personal assets to mishandle that public money. Now, that seems like a strange request coming from a charter school member, but I'm telling you, it's got to stop, because you just keep piling the rules on us every year, and we're having to hire people to handle those rules, when that was the whole idea of charters, was to get away from a lot of that bureaucracy. So I'm asking you to put some strings on us, but I'm also asking you to give some leeway in the charter capital money. Just want to keep it in front of you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Gene. Okay, Jorge Lugo, Public Education.
Good morning. I guess we're moving towards the afternoon. I'll try and be as brief as possible. My name is Jorge Lugo. I'm a teacher at Sebastian River High School here in Indian River County, and I sit on the executive board for the IRCEA, the Indian River County Education Association. I'm also an active member of the Florida Education Association's Government Relations Committee, so I will be contacting all of your offices and making time to come up and visit you in Tallahassee during this legislative session. I want to address just a few issues with the time that I do have. One would be on a piggyback of the charter school funding. I would like to see the legislature address funding for our public schools and our charter schools here in the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, we only average about a little over $6,000 per student is what the funding is here in Indian River County. That puts us about $4,000 below the average in the United States, which has, according to the Washington Post recent publication, the average in the United States of America is about $10,600 per pupil. In addition, I'd like to see funding for the educators within the state of Florida. Florida ranks 44th in teacher pay, meaning that there are 43 other states that pay better than Florida. This is unbelievable considering the gains that Florida has made despite the continued additions onto education throughout these past years, especially as you look at testing as a primary example, which I know Representative Mayfield, you've addressed this recently. The amount of testing that occurs here in the state of Florida, just to give you a rough idea of how much testing does occur over the next 2 weeks, this week and next week, 10 days of school, 6 of those days are allotted to testing in both the high schools, both high schools here in Indian River County, and the middle schools here in Indian River County. 6 out of 10 days, we have students pulled out of class to take tests that were instituted because of statutes and legislature passed by this, some of the members that sit here right now. I would ask that you, as you consider educational bills during this legislative session, consider talking to the teachers, not the people who say they're teachers, not the people who say we were once teachers, actually coming back to your districts and talking to your teachers representatives, your school board members here in Indian River County, St. Lucie County, Brevard County, Martin County. Senator Negron, you have quite the extensive district, and you have many different teacher associations and teachers to speak to, and school board members. Speak to them directly. It is difficult to break time away from our classrooms as teachers, but we're happy to do so at your request. Today I give up my free time, well, not my free time, my time with my students, seniors in high school, whose next step is the real world and colleges, to come here and speak to you and let you know that a lot of the legislation that gets proposed in front of you during your legislative session was never made with input from teachers, from school board administrators, from school principals and assistant principals. The last thing that I'd like to address is an issue that was brought up here when Dr. Massey was up here, president of Indian River State College. He addressed an issue of remediation of students. And Representative Mayfield, you specifically asked, why is it that the schools pass these kids if they're not ready? Please remember that here in Indian River County, we pride ourselves on our ability to educate our students in the public schools. Taking Vero Beach High School, the larger high school, is just an example, with 2,800 students, 600 seniors, which is equal to the charter high school's enrollment, just the senior class of Vero Beach High School. They do a pretty good job despite they don't have the resources. We have at Vero Beach High School alone, a 78% pass rate on AP calculus exams where the state average is 55%. 78% of our AP seniors are taking calculus and passing. Likewise, chemistry, we have a 58% pass rate where the state average is 41% pass rate on these AP exams. Macroeconomics, 61% pass rate, while the state pass rate is 41%. World history, a 69% pass rate on the AP exam, while the state average is 42%. I don't say this to boast for the Vero Beach High School teachers, as I teach at Sebastian River High School, not Vero High. But I do say this to show you that despite the fact that public school teachers are lacking resources, and we may complain, we still manage to achieve day in, day out. Despite the fact that our students are pulled out of our classrooms for 6 out of 10 days, we still achieve day in and day out. All we are asking is for you to listen and help a little bit. When you listen to the pieces of legislation that are offered, question where it came from. Pick up the phone and call us. I'll be happy to answer. If you have any questions of me, please feel free. Contact me.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Senator Altman?
And I appreciate your comments. And I happen to listen to a teacher quite often. I'm married to one.
Oh, I'm well aware.
And I will agree, we do not pay teachers enough for what they do. And hopefully we can continue to move toward a more equitable reimbursement. But I wanted to say something about a number you mentioned, though, because I chair the Education Innovation Committee under our Education Council Chair, Joe Pickens, fantastic person. And one of the things that we had a charge to do was to really determine how much we spend per student here in the state of Florida. I know you mentioned the 6,000. That number is part of what we call the FEFP. But when we really look what we spend in Florida per student, it's actually much, much higher than that. Total expenditure per student in Florida is somewhere around a range between $12,000 and $13,000 per student. Higher in the high school levels than the early childhood when you look at total cost. And I think part of our problem with some of our teacher pay and other issues is not because of total per student funding. It's probably because of too much bureaucracy or red tape or whatever. But I just wanted to correct that number. It's just significantly higher. It's a rather healthy appropriation.
A good amount of that money comes from the local level. Just to give you a rough idea, as one of our board members sits here, Mr. Frost, although we are allocated a certain amount of money from the state and around the $6,000 range, we do spend here in this county over $8,000 per student. That gap, that difference there is made up locally here. I agree. We spend more than $6,000 per student. The question is, where does the money come from? Is it coming from the state, or is the burden put onto the local shoulders? The real question here, all we want to see is fairness. If the local school boards and the local taxpayer are asked to fund more and more money, why doesn't the state step up and fund some more as well?
I mean, I don't want to get in a point counter.
No, I understand.
Florida has the most fair, equitable education distribution formula in the nation. It's nationally renowned because we have in our Constitution the requirement of a free and uniform, high-quality education program. So, yes, part of it's local. Ultimately, it's all from the taxpayers or the folks who visit.
I agree.
But that uniformity provision, I didn't want to differ. I appreciate what you're saying. I just wanted to.
Absolutely.
That number, 13,000, is something that a lot of people are not aware of because we only talk about that one-half portion. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you. If there are any
Great.
other questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Next, we're going to hear from Lamar. And I noticed you have your son who's been sitting there very patiently with you. And after that, we're going to have Mr. O'Connor and then Mr. Geiger and then Lang Sykes, if you guys will get ready. We've got about a minute, but we'll get through everybody.
Okay. All right. My presentation was officially about 2 minutes and 28 seconds, but I had a couple add-ons. And Senator Altman, thank you very much for enlightening the public on how much we spend on public school students. I could send my child to Masters Academy for 2 years for that money. He's homeschooled right now, as you can see. I also want to thank you, Representative Mayfield and Senator Negron, for meeting privately with me to discuss Common Core. And Senator Altman, I would appreciate having the opportunity with you also to do the same. Senator Negron, we also met with Chris Quackenbush from the West Coast, and she pointed out some of the anti-American propaganda in our public school textbooks by paragraph and by page. And I hope you took that to heart, because what's going on in our public schools right now is directly related to Common Core and its origins at the United Nations and London-based Pearson Company. I also wanted to give a hat tip to Charles Searcy, who pointed out during his campaign for the Indian River School Board that the government provides about 8% of funding for education but demands 100% control, which is true. And so I think it is in the best interest of our students, parents, and teachers to cut ties with the federal government and federal funding, as some states have already done, like Oklahoma. Give the money back, because the mandates that are associated with those federal dollars are much more expensive than what we would pay if we truly had state and local control of our education. The Florida School Board Association said this week that end-of-course exams will cost over $1 billion to implement and $1 billion per year to continue. So those are staggering, and taxpayers will most likely absorb those costs. According to an October Gallup poll, support for Common Core continues to decline among Democrats and Republicans, with 35% of all parents viewing Common Core negatively, while 33% view it positively, a downward shift of 9% in less than 6 months. When only Republicans are polled, 58% of parents hold a negative view of Common Core. We don't want it in our children's schools. I think we've made that point. We provided mountains of evidence and personal testimonies from parents, students, teachers, and experts in their respective fields regarding the disastrous effects of Common Core on children due to anti-American propaganda, high-stakes testing, developmentally inappropriate material, invasion of privacy, and multitudes of federal mandates as a result of accepting federal dollars. Contrary to the rhetoric of Jeb Bush and other proponents of Common Core, their claim of higher, more rigorous standards, greater accountability, college readiness, and state-generated local control is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Listen as these quotes from 3 of the architects of Common Core contradict their own claims. From the Washington Post, during an hour-long interview at Harvard University in September of 2013, Bill Gates, who has invested billions of dollars in Common Core, said, and I quote, "It would be great if our educational stuff worked, but that we won't know for probably a decade," end quote. From Truth in American Education, David Coleman, current president of the College Board and creator of the Common Core Standards, said the following: "I probably spend a little more time on literacy because, as weak as my qualifications are there, in math they're even more desperate and they're lacking," end quote. From Pioneer Institute, Jason Zimba, the chief architect of the Common Core Standards, said, and I quote, "Common Core is not only for STEM, not for STEM, it's also not for selective colleges," end quote. We've talked a lot about remedial training for kids going into college. Well, you know, this Common Core is not a solution to the problem. It is increasing our problem. This begs the question, with whom will you stand? Will you stand with parents, children, and teachers, or with billion-dollar corporations like the Bill Gates Foundation, the London-based Pearson Corporation, who provides 90% of public school materials? So when we say we have school choice, that means which Pearson materials would you like to use? Take your pick. We don't want to use Pearson. We want alternatives. We want parents to be able to opt out of testing. We want teachers to be able to opt out of testing. We've tied their hands and we've put handcuffs on teachers. Let the teachers teach. Let the children learn. Let parents have a say in their children's education. It is the parents' responsibility to educate their children, not the state and the federal government. So I would encourage all of you to meet regularly with your constituents and to support legislation from the various Stop Common Core organizations around the state. Stop Common Core Southeast Florida, on the West Coast, Chris Quackenbush with Southwest Citizens Alliance. I think Dr. Karen Ephraim, who provided some of the statistics that I shared with you today. Her Florida Stop Common Core Coalition does an excellent job enlightening the public on facts and figures and the amount of money associated with Common Core. So thank you very much, and I would appreciate a response to my question as to whom will you stand with, the students, the parents, and the teachers, or with large corporations?
Thank you, Lamar. Any questions? Okay. Okay, next we're going to have John O'Connor. All Aboard Florida.
Good afternoon. John O'Connor, President of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2201. I just want to talk briefly with you about some of the impacts that All Aboard Florida is going to have in our community. If you see the map before you, we have a total of 12 stations in the county. 8 of those stations are west of the tracks. 4 of those stations are east of the tracks. And of the 4 of those stations, we only have 3 ambulances east of the tracks. And out of those 4 that are east of the tracks, 3 are on the Barrier Island. So we have some major considerations for the impacts that we're going to be associated with. Also, we particularly don't have a heavy rescue team or a hazmat team to respond to this type of a disaster. If we did have a collision, those require special tools and special training. So there's a monetary impact with that. Roughly a heavy rescue cost anywhere between $1 million or more, and then there's associated training with that as well. The other thing is that with the impacts as far as the crossings themselves,